Chapter 4693. As for the mobile phone, although Lin Yi had not personally tested whether there was a signal or not, if there was no such thing, it was impossible to achieve long-distance communication. The so-called 1,000-mile sound transmission was just an illusory legend. In reality, no one had seen it. Strictly speaking, the mobile phone was the real 1,000-mile sound transmission. If there is a chance, Wuxia suddenly said. Lin Yi frowned and waited for her to continue. If there is a chance, take me? Wuxia was still hesitating. The more she spoke, the more shy she became. In the end, her voice was so low that it could not be heard. Only she could guess. And? Lin Yi turned his head and looked at her strangely. Although it was too dark to see clearly, he still subconsciously made this action. What does this chick want to express? Why is he acting so bashful? Could it be something very embarrassing? That shouldn't be the case, right? Although they had that awkward scene, Lin Yi felt that this chick should be a traditional woman in her bones. If there is a chance, take me to the secular world. When Lin Yi couldn't help but let his imagination run wild, Wuxia finally finished her words. However, her voice was so low that even Lin Yi could barely hear it. You want to go to the secular world? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised. The sentence was a bit familiar. In his memory, Shanghai Laner seemed to have said something similar. If you don't want to take me, then forget it. I'm just curious. Wuxia pouted. Hee, if you want to go, of course you can, but the premise is that I can go back. It is not easy to go from the secular world to the heavenly island. It is even more difficult to go back from the heavenly island to the secular world. We will see when the time comes. Lin Yi sighed. Although this chick's brain was strange and a little incomprehensible, he didn't hate it. At least from the bottom of his heart, he had begun to treat this chick as a friend, not a purely beneficial partner. Yeah, I have never heard of anyone who can go back. She heard Lin Yi's sigh. Wuxia hurriedly explained, I'm just saying. I don't have any other meaning. Don't take it seriously. Since you've already said it, how can I not take it seriously? Let's see if there's a chance. If I can go back, I'll call you. Lin Yi smiled. Although it was indeed very difficult to return to the secular world from Heaven Stage Island, according to the information he currently had, it would be very difficult. In fact, the probability of success was not as low as one would imagine. Thinking about it carefully, there were at least 3 options. The first option was also the most reliable one, and that was to find Zhang Liju. That damn thing's personal experience had proven that he had a reliable way, and with his relationship with Zhang Liju, as long as he could find him, he believed that Zhang Liju wouldn't reject him right away. The only difficulty was when they would be able to meet this legendary figure who was elusive and elusive. As for the second method, it fell on the Central Chamber of Commerce. It was very clear that the Central Chamber of Commerce had a way to freely travel between Heaven Stage Island and the secular world. If they could find a way to find out, naturally Lin Yi would have a chance. However, this method was much more difficult than the first one. After all, the Central Chamber of Commerce had a lot of strong practitioners. Although Lin Yi could kill profound ascension practitioners in seconds, if he really went in, he would still end up as a corpse on the street. As for the third method, it fell on Han Jingjing. Although it was a bit ridiculous for her to research the mystery of the teleportation circle between Heaven Stage Island and the secular world, which of her previous research wasn't a miracle, as long as she had enough conditions and time. Lin Yi really didn't think that this was impossible. And Wuxia couldn't help but feel a little happy, although she knew in her heart that after the West Island trial ended, this West Island trial, she and Lin Yi wouldn't have much interaction, but after hearing this she felt a little expectant. If only she could really go to the secular world with this guy. As the two talked, the sky gradually brightened. Although the visibility was still not high, at least it wasn't as dark as before. After talking with Lin Yi for a while, Wuxia was finally not afraid anymore, and the two immediately got up and continued on their way. However, not long after they walked, Lin Yi suddenly heard a soft rumbling sound beside him. He couldn't help but look towards the sound and saw Wuxia with her head down and her face red. She was almost looking for a hole to hide in. Are you hungry? The corner of Lin Yi's mouth curled up a little. Practitioners don't need to eat, I'm not hungry. Wuxia still had her head down and didn't dare to look at anyone, but she said it quite firmly. Lin Yi shook his head with a faint smile. Although it was true that practitioners didn't need to eat, it didn't mean that they really didn't eat. This was an innate instinct. Even if the body wasn't hungry, it would still have this reaction unconsciously after a long time. Just like Wuxia's stomach growling, this was a clear proof. If practitioners really didn't need to eat, so many high-end restaurants on the Heaven Stage Island would have been closed long ago. How could it be seen everywhere now? Lin Yi felt that the various kinds of delicacies on the Heaven Stage Island were no worse than those in the secular world. Some of them were even sold at a very high price, and there were still many diners and guests. Lin Yi suddenly took out some extremely delicate and delicious pastries, turned his head and handed them to Hui Yudi, saying, "Here, satisfy your craving. Where did you get them from?" Hui Yudi's eyes widened in disbelief. Her throat squirmed uncontrollably and she almost drooled. "I conjured them." Lin Yi smiled mysteriously. Hui Yudi couldn't help but be startled. She'd been watching him the whole time, and this guy clearly didn't bring anything with him. He didn't even have a normal backpack and he came empty-handed. It wasn't strange for him to have some small treasures on him, but where did these delicate-looking pastries come from? Hui Yudi thought to herself. It couldn't really be conjured out of thin air, right? She had never heard of such a magical power in the world. "Alright, don't be silly. Since there are ready-made ones, eat them quickly," Lin Yi said and started eating first. "Wait, leave some for me." Hui Yudi looked really greedy and immediately stopped thinking about how these things were conjured. She quickly snatched a piece from Lin Yi's hand and ate it in small bites. Chapter 4694. Lin Yi looked at Hui Yudi's careful eating and couldn't help but smile. These exquisite pastries were actually put into the jade space from the envoy's mansion in West Island. Anyway, the space was very large. Now he put whatever he saw in it so that he could be prepared. The two divided the pastries Lin Yi took out. After eating, Hui Yudi wiped the corner of her mouth with some desire. At this time Lin Yi suddenly said, "Do you want more?" "You have more?" Hui Yudi was shocked again. She looked at Lin Yi up and down as if she was looking at a monster. What was this guy made of? He didn't even carry a bag when he went out. How could he hide so many pastries at will? "Yes, if you want to eat, I will definitely make sure you are full." Lin Yi nodded. "I think I'll pass." Hui Yudi shook her head after some hesitation. Eating was just a habit to her, and it wasn't necessary for her to eat too much. A girl eating so much in front of others would be laughed at. She didn't know why, but she didn't want to be laughed at by this guy. "Oh, then forget it." Lin Yi put it away indifferently. Hui Yudi suddenly felt depressed again. Why was this guy like this every time? Once he said no, he immediately let it go. Couldn't he ask again? Didn't he know that girls should be more reserved? What the hell was this chick doing? Seeing Hui Yudi sulking and walking away, Lin Yi couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. Women were difficult to understand, and this chick changed every now and then. It was especially difficult to understand. However, Lin Yi didn't need to understand. He was with Hui Yudi purely for the Thunder Shen Ratan. As long as it didn't interfere with this fundamental purpose, he would let this chick do whatever she wanted. The two hurried on their way again. As a result, after walking for less than an hour, the scene in the distance suddenly changed. That place was the opposite of the barren scene in the surrounding places. It was lush and green. It was like a fairyland on earth. Oasis. Lin Yi was overjoyed. Anyone who had walked in this monotonous desert for 2 days and suddenly saw a rare oasis would definitely be overjoyed. For ordinary people, seeing such a lush green oasis in the desert was no less than grasping at a life-saving straw. For a cultivator like Lin Yi, although it was not that exaggerated, his mood instantly improved. He could not help but feel refreshed just by looking at it from afar. Hui Yudi's reaction was much more direct than Lin Yi's. After exclaiming excitedly, she immediately sprinted towards the direction of the oasis and walked for 2 whole days in the desert. Sitting and lying on the sand, her whole body was covered with dust and it was extremely uncomfortable. What she wanted to do the most now was to find a clear spring and take a good bath. Upon seeing this, Lin Yi did not try to dissuade her. Although it was somewhat dangerous for Hui Yudi to run like this, it was not a big problem with him keeping an eye on her from behind. His divine sense had already spread out in advance, so if there was any danger he would be able to detect it in advance. The two of them quickly approached this rare oasis, and Hui Yudi could not wait to rush in. However, when she was about 1,000 feet away, she suddenly stopped and looked ahead with a frown. Why are there so many people? Lin Yi was a little surprised and stopped beside her. He could not see anything from afar, but now that he was close, he clearly found that within this oasis that was not considered big, there were actually dozens of people gathered. There were actually dozens of people gathered there, and these people were all gathered in one place. They didn't scatter and it felt like they were having a party. What should we do? Hui Yudi could not help but turn her head to look at Lin Yi nervously. She did not know when, but she had already unconsciously regarded Lin Yi as the backbone. Could they also be here for the Thunder Shen Ratan? Lin Yi looked at her and said. Those who appeared here were naturally the participants of this trial, and there was only one thing that could make them gather together. That was the treasure of heaven and earth, and it definitely could not be an ordinary treasure of heaven and earth. Only rare treasures like the Thunder Shenratan could cause such a big stir. I don't think so. Huiyudi thought for a while and said, although everyone knows about this ancient battlefield relic, the information about the Thunder Shenratan has always been confidential, and only a few people know about it. Unless someone spread the news with ulterior motives, it is impossible to gather so many people. If it really causes such a stir, the top management of West Island will definitely take action. Well, it makes sense. Linny nodded. The existence of the Thunder Shenratan was a rare strategic resource for the entire West Island. It was okay if only a few people inside knew about it, but if it really caused an uproar and everyone knew about it, West Island would inevitably fall into chaos. Ning Shangling might even directly give a kill order. At that time, it was estimated that none of these trial takers who knew the news would survive. It was related to the core interests of the entire West Island, and there was no room for mercy. Although we took the shortest route, after all, we were delayed for a day, so these people probably came here from other directions. Don't worry, this place is still far from the Thunder Shenratan, Huiyudi comforted him. That's good. Lin Yi breathed a sigh of relief and looked ahead with a frown. But something must have happened there, or it is impossible for so many people to gather here. Let's be careful. Okay. Huiyudi also looked dignified. Although the oasis would naturally attract people to stop, it was definitely not a small matter that so many people gathered here inexplicably. Even if it had nothing to do with the Thunder Shenratan, they could not take it lightly. This is the only way, right? Linny asked. Yes, our destination is after the 10,000-year canyon, and this oasis is the only entrance to the 10,000-year canyon. Huiyudi nodded and said. Then there's no other choice. Let's go. He took the lead and walked forward. Although there was definitely something wrong with this abnormal situation, it was just as I said before. A trial of this level was not difficult at all for him. At most, it was just a matter of luck. As for the danger, if he could not handle it with his strength, then the other trial takers would have died long ago. Huiyudi carefully followed behind Lin Yi. She was not nervous in her heart, but instead had an intoxicating sense of security. Although this old-fashioned man was often unromantic, it had to be said that at least he gave people the feeling that he was very reliable. The two of them entered the oasis with caution. As soon as they entered the shade of the trees, they immediately felt a refreshing feeling of enlightenment, making them feel comfortable from head to toe. The tiredness from the journey was instantly swept away, and their entire body and mind involuntarily relaxed. Chapter 4695. Although the concentration of spiritual chi in this place could not be compared with that in the Five Poison Swamp, it was still very rare. It was even much better than some specially built caves in the North Island. This oasis is the throat of the 10,000 Years Grand Canyon. All the spiritual chi in and out of the 10,000 Years Grand Canyon will gather here. That's why it's so rich. It's also because of this that this oasis appeared. Otherwise it would definitely be a desert. Huiyudi explained behind him. It could be seen that in order to obtain the Thunder Shenratan, this girl had done a lot of research on this place. After all, unlike Lin Yi, the primordial battlefield was still very dangerous for a perfected nascent soul cultivator like her. This oasis was not large, only a little more than 1,000 feet in radius. However, in such a small area, there were dozens of high-level cultivators gathered. Except for a few experts in the peak of the Gold Core realm, most of them were experts in the original Infant realm. This was the mainstream strength of this trial. These people were gathered together at the moment, as if they were facing something together. Their faces were very dignified. Could it be that there was a terrible spirit beast blocking the way? Lin Yi and Huiyudi's appearance didn't cause any commotion, nor did they attract anyone's attention. At this moment, everyone's attention was on the empty space in front of them. There weren't any frightening spirit beasts there, but a group of practitioners. It was just that this group of people had a ferocious aura, and they weren't friendly people. Following the gaze of the crowd, Lin Yi glanced forward, and then his eyelids twitched unconsciously. He was extremely shocked. The leader of the group in front of him, a fierce man with a scar on his face, was actually a profound ascending stage master. Lin Yi couldn't help but rub his eyes. Did he see it wrong? Wasn't it said that only nascent soul stage masters and below could enter this place? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to pass through the transmission array. Then what was going on with this profound ascending stage master? This fierce aura that was far above that of a nascent soul stage master couldn't be faked, right? Even if someone could fake his aura, it would definitely not be able to hide from Lin Yi's eyes. From head to toe, he could see that this scarred man was a genuine profound ascending stage master. Although he was only at the peak of the early stage of profound ascending stage, this guy appearing in this place. That in itself was already a huge piece of news. How about it? Is there anyone else who wants it? If you want to pass, hurry up and take out your money. As long as you take out enough heavenly materials and earthly treasures, I will let you pass. Don't worry, this 10,000-year Grand Canyon behind me is a primitive land that is rarely visited by humans. There are countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures inside, and it's very easy to recoup my losses. Ah! Scarface looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. After listening to his words, Lin Yi and Hui Yudi immediately understood. It turned out that this group of people hadn't gathered here to fight over any heavenly treasures, but to meet a mountain king who had occupied the mountain. According to Hui Yudi, the 10,000-year Great Canyon was a rare treasure land in the primordial battlefield. Because of the unique environment here, there were far more natural treasures than in other places. If one were to try their luck in the desert, they might not be able to find a natural treasure even after 10 days or half a month. However, in this 10,000-year Great Canyon, there were many natural treasures. It was said that as long as one walked patiently for a day, there would be a harvest. In addition, the judging standard of the West Island trial test was the treasure of heaven and earth, so it was natural. Any trial taker with a little bit of information would find a way to come here, unless it was someone like Ren Zhongyuan who had other intentions. Only then would they let go of this legendary treasure land. Now that this mountain king had occupied the only entrance here, it was equivalent to holding everyone's weakness, and they could only obediently let him do whatever he wanted. After all, in the face of such a cruel and unruly profound ascending stage master, these nascent soul stage cultivators were really helpless. After all, there was no other freak like Lin Yi in the 5 heavenly islands, who could cross a great realm to challenge a profound ascending stage master. Damn it. If this guy was alone, with so many of us together, I believe that even if he was a profound ascending stage master, he wouldn't be able to handle it. It's a pity that he has so many followers. A person not far from Lin Yi whispered bitterly. There's no other way, we're really unlucky. We actually met this scar-faced man. It seems that there's no hope for this West Island trial. The West Island princess has such a good opportunity to choose a husband, sigh. Another person sighed. Why did this scar-faced man appear in this place? Isn't it impossible for profound ascending stage masters to enter? Lin Yi asked quietly behind them. Hey, it's another unlucky newcomer. The man heard the words and looked back at Lin Yi. When he saw Hui Yudi, his eyes lit up, but after all, he was wearing a veil, so he didn't show too much of a pervert. He just shook his head and smiled bitterly. I heard from those who came earlier that this scar-faced man seemed to be in the bottleneck of the nascent soul peak in a previous trial. As a result, he got some kind of adventure during the trial, and then accidentally broke through, so he couldn't get out and could only be trapped here as a mountain king. So that's how it is. Lin Yi glanced at Hui Yudi subconsciously. This girl was also at the bottleneck of nascent soul mastery. She wouldn't meet the same fate if she wasn't careful, would she? This place was really dangerous, even a rare breakthrough could get her killed. That can only mean that his own strength is not enough. Controlling the realm of strength is a compulsory course for all East Continent college students, and it's the most basic. If he can't even do this, it can only mean that he can reach his current realm purely by luck, and his strength is seriously insufficient. Hui Yudi rolled her eyes at Lin Yi. Miss, are you from East Continent? The person just now glanced at Hui Yudi again. Seeing that Hui Yudi seemed to be too lazy to talk, he could only bitterly smile and say, That's right, but Scarface is a genuine early-stage profound ascension expert after all. No matter how strong a nascent soul stage is, in front of him, they are just vegetables. The situation is stronger than the person, what can we do? Yes, from what the scar-faced man said, he has been here for hundreds of years. The group of people around him also came back late from every trial, and in the end they couldn't get out, so they were all gathered by him and became a tyrant here. These people are all desperados, not to be trifled with. The others said with lingering fear. From your point of view, if we want to get to the Grand Canyon through here, we'll have to give him some treasures? Lin Yi asked again, not agreeing or disagreeing with the question. If you want to pass through here, you have to pay for the passage. This is the rule set by this mountain king. If you don't have the strength to resist, don't you have to give him treasures? A person said. Chapter 4696. Otherwise, you can just not go to the 10,000-year Grand Canyon and they won't be able to stop you. However, if you do that, it will be difficult to gain anything from this trial. In my opinion, you should obediently do as they say. This way, you should be able to get back what you spent in the 10,000-year Grand Canyon. You might even be lucky. Are you stupid? You dare to believe Scarface's bullshit about eating people without spitting out the bones? It's true that there are good things in the 10,000-year Grand Canyon, but you can't just casually pick up all the treasures in there. You can't even imagine how many terrifying things are in there. Even if you go in, it's hard to say if you can come out alive. You want to get back what you spent? That's right. Do you know how big Scarface's appetite is? Even if you go in, even if you are really lucky enough to find something good, when you come out, won't he plunder it again? Will he let you go so easily? Can't you use a little more brains? Another person echoed. The moment they said this, the expressions of the nearby cultivators turned incomparably ugly. This was the truth. Scarface was definitely not a kind and honest person. If he let you in, he would plunder you, and if he let you out, of course he would plunder you as well. This was something that could be understood even with one's toes. If they worked for him for free and even risked their lives, then what was the point of doing anything? What else is there to say? We can only avoid this damn place. Even if the harvest is a little less, it's still better than being plundered by Scarface. I'm not stupid. Immediately, someone had the thought of retreating. Many people had the same thought, but not everyone was willing to retreat just like that. After all, once they retreated, it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack in the desert. Instead of that, it was better to take a risk and seek riches in danger. Sure enough, while everyone was talking in low voices, a man in gray suddenly jumped out from the crowd. He instantly attracted everyone's attention. I am Duan Wuzong of the Thousand Blades sect. I don't have any treasures on me. Because of this, I must go to the 10,000-year Grand Canyon. I believe you don't want to fight to the death over such a small matter. That won't be good for either of us. As the gray-robed man spoke, he revealed a powerful and overbearing aura. He was an expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm. The moment this Duan Wuzong appeared, the crowd went into an uproar. Everyone's eyes widened. The reason they were stuck here was because they lacked a leader. But now it finally appeared. Oh, it looks like a tough guy has come and is ready to challenge me alone? Scarface looked disdainful and carelessly glanced at Duan Wuzong. I wouldn't dare. Whether the others live or die has nothing to do with me. I'm just asking you to open the door. After all, if we really fight, it won't be a good thing for both of us. Someone might even fish in troubled waters. What do you think? Duan Wuzong's tone was hard to conceal his pride. This guy is going to walk into a mine. From afar, Linny smiled and shook his head. This thousand-blade sect's Duan Wuzong was indeed a rare expert, and could be considered an outstanding existence among the group of peak nascent soul stage cultivators. It was normal to have this kind of arrogance and confidence. Unfortunately, the opponent was a peak early stage profound ascension expert and wouldn't fall for it. You don't think he's good? Hoi Yudi couldn't help but ask curiously. In her opinion, this person's strength was very strong. Just as he had said, if they really fought, even if it wasn't a lose-lose situation, it would definitely cause Scarface a lot of trouble. If Scarface was afraid of him, he might really let him go. Of course. Scarface's group is small in number. They can only suppress so many people by relying on deterrence. If he sets a precedent, do you think so many people here will still be trembling in fear and not dare to move? Once the situation gets out of control, even with Scarface's strength, he won't be able to control it. Then he will completely fail as the Mountain King. Linny analyzed. Then what will he do? Hoi Yudi asked thoughtfully. Of course he will destroy this Duan Wuzong with lightning speed. As long as he can establish his power in one fell swoop, no one here will dare to resist him. They can only obediently let him plunder. Linny smiled faintly. At the same time he put himself aside. A peak early stage profound ascension expert was an unparalleled deterrent to others, but don't forget that he had killed a profound ascension expert a long time ago, and it was a one-hit kill. Before Lin Yi's voice fell, Scarface made a decision and laughed. Ha, Lousy has occupied this place for so many years, and there really aren't many who dare to threaten Lousy. Surname Duan, you're a bit interesting, but unfortunately you miscalculated. Threaten Lousy? Do you think Lousy is the kind of coward who is afraid of threats? After saying that, Scarface suddenly let out a long roar and immediately attacked. Duan Wuzong was shocked. He stood up not to fight Scarface, but simply to make the other party feel that he was not to be trifled with, so he retreated. Who would have thought that the other party would not even spare him a glance? Now that he was riding a tiger, he had no choice but to fight. Clang, clang, clang. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound of metal colliding, a pile of divine weapons suddenly appeared on Duan Wuzong's body. All kinds of swords, spears, swords, halberds, everything needed. There were at least 13 of them, and no one knew how he carried them with him. They all floated around him and the formation was quite astonishing. There was a sudden gasp of cold air. Although they had not officially fought, this Duan Wuzong was really strong. Looking at his posture, he could actually control 13 weapons at the same time. It was really incredible. If an ordinary expert fought against him, wouldn't they be beaten to death by these weapons in a matter of minutes? I've long heard that the Thousand Blade sect's martial techniques are unique. It is said that the stronger the Thousand Blade sect's disciple is, the more weapons they can control. When they reach the limit, it is even possible to achieve 1,000 blades at the same time. Seeing it today, it is indeed a well-deserved reputation. Huo sighed. It is indeed a bit interesting. Seeing this, Lin could not help but be interested. He had seen many experts before and there was no lack of all kinds of strange methods, but this was the first time he had seen someone who could control more than 10 weapons at the same time. I'll say it one last time. If you let me go, nothing will happen between us. Otherwise, when the situation becomes chaotic and there are so many people here, the situation is not something you can control. Duan Wuzong still did not want to use weapons unless it was absolutely necessary. Although he had full confidence in his own strength, to say that he could really defeat an expert at the peak of the early stage of mysterious ascension was obviously a pipe dream. Chapter 4697. If they really fought, no matter how the situation developed in the end, as the opponent's first target, he would definitely not be able to get away with it. He was well aware of this point. So much bullshit. Scarface roared loudly, and the aura on his body suddenly skyrocketed to an extremely terrifying degree. His entire body seemed like an overlord that had descended into the world, and he instantly wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves. The weather changed and he sneered without end. You still want to mess up the situation? With this old man here, can the situation be messed up? Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. You asked for it. Duan Wuzong saw this and no longer hesitated. The murderous intent on his body intensified, and the 13 weapons floating in the air all made a sharp sound. He suddenly roared, 1,000 blades return to me, one line kill. Before he finished speaking, the 13 weapons howled at the same time, their speed instantly increasing to a point where it was hard to see with the naked eye. They formed a long snake and attacked Scarface. Their speed was fast and their power was strong, causing everyone present to raise their eyebrows. Anyone could see that after these 13 weapons formed the one-line kill array, their power was not as simple as 1 + 1. From the first to the 13th, as they broke through the opponent's defense step by step, the damage also increased. Anything in front of them would be pierced through. When faced with such a frightening attack, dodging was the only choice. However, just when everyone thought that this was the case, Scarface suddenly laughed loudly. He did not dodge or evade. Only when the 13 weapons came close to his body did he suddenly throw out a punch. In an instant, the sky changed color. Everyone could only faintly hear the roar of 10,000 beasts. Their eyes looked at the faint shadow that appeared on Scarface's body. It looked like a tiger but also like a dragon. Dragon-tiger killing fist? Isn't this the legendary unyielding and ferocious fist technique? Huo was shocked. This West Island trial really gathered the elites of all the islands. There were all kinds of experts. First, there was an expert from the Thousand Blade sect, and now there was a dragon-tiger killing fist. If they were placed outside, they would all be ruthless characters who could make a name for themselves. Previously, she had thought that this guy's foundation was insufficient. Now it seemed that it was not so simple. Those who could successfully cultivate the dragon-tiger killing fist were not easy to deal with. Unyielding and ferocious? When Lin heard this, he couldn't help but become a bit more interested. He didn't know whether this legendary firm and fierce fist technique was better or worse than his mad flame thousand bursting fist. Before he finished speaking, the two of them had already clashed head-on. A loud rumbling sound was heard, and the scene that unfolded in front of them made everyone's jaws drop in shock. A total of 13 divine weapons were penetrated from head to tail by Scarface's fist. All the weapons were destroyed on the spot, and as for Duan Wuzong, he had been sent flying by the shockwave of his punch. For a moment, it was impossible to find him, let alone know if he was dead or alive. The dragon-tiger slaughter fist truly lived up to its reputation. The entire place was deathly silent. Everyone was looking at each other and constantly rubbing their eyes, afraid that they were seeing things. The Thousand Blade sect's Duan Wuzong. Such a powerful expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm was killed in seconds. Who else? Scarface had a sinister and terrifying smile on his face. His ferocious gaze slowly swept across the faces of everyone present. Everyone who was swept by his gaze. No matter how unruly they were before, they couldn't help but lower their heads, trembling like a quail. They didn't dare to look him in the eye. Ah! A bunch of spineless cowards. Scarface let out a maniacal laugh. He casually sat on a huge rock behind him and looked at everyone's eyes. His eyes were filled with disdain. Since no one dares to cause trouble, then hurry up and do things according to the rules. If there's anyone who doesn't obey, then kill them. No one dared to make a sound. Duan Wuzong's previous example was right in front of them. Although there were many nascent soul realm experts here, those that could match Duan Wuzong's strength were few and far between. If they dared to stand out now, they would definitely die without a complete corpse. What should we do? Hui Yudi lightly pulled on Lin Yi's sleeves. Although her strength wasn't any weaker than Duan Wuzong, it wasn't that much stronger. Facing Scarface's dragon tiger killing fist, she would definitely end up the same way. What to do now was up to Lin Yi. Lin Yi was just about to speak when there was a sudden commotion behind him. Everyone turned their heads to look and saw two figures slowly approaching. Lin Yi took a look and his lips curled into a playful smile. It wasn't anyone else but two of his old acquaintances, Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming. Su Lingchong didn't have much to say. Other than the fact that his temperament was getting colder and weirder, there wasn't anything special about him. At this moment, the focus of everyone's attention was Kang Mingming. This flashy guy with an AI armor and a laser cannon had already attracted a lot of attention before the trial started. Now he was naturally the center of attention. Oh, so many people. It's quite lively, isn't it? Kang Mingming swaggered over arrogantly. Previously, because he was too weak, he could only pretend to be a coward. Now that he had obtained a set of super high-tech equipment, his entire person was like a salted fish that had turned over a new leaf. He had obviously become arrogant. Other than Su Lingchong, his immediate superior, the others, including the nascent soul stage experts, were simply not in his eyes. No matter where he went, he had an arrogant attitude. Suddenly seeing such a weird-looking guy, Scarface couldn't help but be stunned. Of course, he didn't recognize the laser cannon and the AI armor, but based on his beast-like intuition, he faintly felt some fear in his heart. Scarface didn't take the initiative to speak, so the quails that were scared by him naturally didn't dare to make a sound. At this time, a bald man standing behind Scarface stood up. This was a nascent soul stage expert. Among their group, his strength was only below Scarface. Hey, that weird-looking kid, you want to go to the 10,000-year Grand Canyon? Come, hand over the heavenly treasures first. Let me see if it's enough. Otherwise, you'd better scram back to where you came from. Otherwise, you'd better not die here. The bald man sneered. Oh, I was wondering what it was. So it's a mountain king collecting tolls here. Kang Mingming laughed indifferently. He was now relying on his super high-tech equipment to look down on others. Why would he put this kind of trash in his eyes? Just as he was about to unleash his power in front of so many people, he suddenly glanced at Lin Yi and Hui Yudi from the corner of his eye. Chapter 4698. Hee hee beauty, it looks like you're stuck here and can't get through, right? I've already told you, although the guy next to you looks decent, he's not reliable at all. He's a pretentious guy, but he's only good at acting tough when he has nothing to do. When it comes to important situations like this, he's useless. Kang Mingming proudly looked at Lin Yi with disdain. He couldn't wait to invite Hui Yudi again. Beauty, come with me. As long as you follow me, you can go anywhere you want. No one can stop you. Lin Yi smiled speechlessly. Kang Mingming really didn't want to give up. He was rejected by Hui Yudi so many times, but he still had this idea. He was really persistent. No need. Hui Yudi refused without thinking. Before, when she didn't know the depth of Lin Yi's strength, she didn't hesitate to choose to team up with Lin Yi, let alone now. Even if Lin Yi's unfathomable strength was not mentioned, she couldn't leave Lin Yi so easily just because of that embarrassing scene. It was even more impossible for her to follow Kang Mingming, who was obviously unreliable. Ugh. Kang Xiaoming couldn't hold it in anymore. It wasn't easy for him to show off, but why was this hot body of a beauty so clueless? Other than acting cool, which part of him was inferior to Lin Yi in? Aha, no one can stop you. You're so arrogant. The bald man on the other side sneered. Your appearance is a bit strange, but it's a pity that you're just a joke. People don't even care about you, and you still have the nerve to brag here. What did you say? Kang Mingming was holding back a belly full of anger. When he heard that, he immediately turned to the bald man with an unfriendly expression. I said you're a joke. You're really strange. Where did so many idiots who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth come from? The bald man grinned hideously. After exchanging a glance with the scar-faced man, he immediately wanted to kill Kang Mingming. They were the only ones who had the final say in this territory. How could they allow this idiot to do whatever he wanted? However, just as he finished speaking, before he could even get into a stance, he suddenly felt a blinding white light flash past his eyes. At first he did not feel anything strange, but then he felt an unbearable pain in his chest. The bald man looked down with difficulty and found a large hole in his chest. Bang! The bald man fell to the ground in a daze, although his breath hadn't been completely cut off. However, everyone knew that he couldn't hold on any longer. It was a miracle that he was still able to struggle at death's door for a while despite being so heavily injured. Everyone was shocked. Even Scarface, a ruthless expert at the peak of the early stage of the mysterious ascending realm, was looking at Kang Ming Ming with an unconcealable look of horror. He knew the bald man's strength. This guy had been with him for decades. His strength was definitely not weak among the experts at the peak of the nascent soul stage. At least, he was not weaker than Duan Wuzong from the Thousand Blades sect. However, he was killed in one move by this weird-looking kid. From beginning to end, he didn't even have a chance to make a move. Even he couldn't do this. What kind of god was this kid? True Chi manifestation? Someone around suddenly exclaimed. True Chi manifestation? Isn't that a magical power that only the legendary experts can do? That's not possible, right? Someone immediately questioned. Nonsense. Didn't you see it with your own eyes? Can it be fake? This is the legendary True Chi manifestation. My goodness, we've met an expert this time. That person retorted. That's right. What kind of divine weapon is that? It can actually unleash True Chi that can manifest. Isn't that too savage? The surrounding people sucked in a cold breath. Listening to the various discussions that these people made up on their own, Kang Ming Ming waved his hand proudly. At the same time he glanced at Lin Yi and Hui Yudi. True Chi manifestation, this was a good gimmick. Looking at Kang Ming Ming's proud attitude, Lin Yi was shocked. Listening to these discussions he couldn't help but find it funny. True Chi manifestation? If that was the case, his 5 elements murderous Chi manifestation had indeed been achieved. However, he wasn't some legendary expert. He just comprehended this super martial skill that belonged to the 5 poison dragon from the remnant thoughts of the giant electric eel. As for Kang Ming Ming, he really didn't want to say anything. However, although this wasn't Kang Ming Ming's own ability, this laser cannon was really awesome. Even an expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm couldn't withstand one blow from him. This was a head-on battle. If this guy had the intention to hide and sneak up on people, the threat would be multiplied. No matter how fast he was, he wouldn't have a chance to react. It seemed that he really had to be careful in the future. I say, are all the people from the secular world so powerful? Is he also a personal disciple of some big shot in the North Island? Hui Yudi was stunned like everyone else. She really didn't think that Kang Ming Ming was strong before, but now that she saw it with her own eyes, she couldn't help but believe it. Hee, this guy is useless. You don't have to pay attention to him. That's not his own strength at all. It's purely an external force. Lin Yi shook his head with a faint smile. External force? You mean his weird-shaped divine weapon? But the more powerful the divine weapon, the more powerful his own strength is to be able to control it, right? Hui Yudi was confused. For cultivators, it didn't mean that having a powerful divine weapon would be able to go against the natural order. They must have the strength to match it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to exert the power of the divine weapon at all. If they were not careful, they might even be backfired by the divine weapon and become the sacrifice of the sacrificial weapon. It's hard to explain in a few words. In short, that thing is a high-tech weapon in the secular world. No matter who gets that thing, as long as he knows how to operate it, he won't be bad. Even if he's just an ordinary person, he can kill a person at the peak of the nascent soul realm with one shot like he did. Lin Yi explained. Oh, it turns out to be a high-tech weapon. Hui Yudi nodded as if she understood. Suddenly she added, this rich guy is really powerful. He even has this kind of thing. Puff. Lin Yi suddenly burst into laughter. It turned out that because of what he said, Kang Ming Ming had already been equated with a rich guy in this girl's eyes. Kang Xiaoming was still trying to please her again and again. If he knew that he was being treated as a dumbass, his expression would definitely be very interesting. Chapter 4699. How about it? Is there anyone else who wants to stop me? Kang Ming Ming looked at Scarface maliciously. He knew that the other party was a peak early stage profound ascension expert, but he had just killed a nascent soul perfection expert. At this time he was bursting with confidence. He absolutely believed that with the power of the laser cannon, that Scarface would only end up the same. Everyone's eyes turned to Scarface. Scarface's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Although his strength was the best in the field, after seeing the scene just now, he really felt a little guilty facing Kang Ming. With the speed and power that the laser cannon showed just now, he couldn't find any way to deal with it. He was not a speed-type expert. If they really fought, he probably wouldn't be much stronger than the bald man. The other party was a terrifying killing weapon formed from true chi. With his flesh and blood, he really couldn't block it. Under the gaze of everyone, Scarface hesitated for a moment. He could only clench his teeth and said, "Okay, I cherish heroes. Seeing that you are strong enough, you can go over." Although Thousand Blade Sex Duan Wuzong was also arrogant before, in his eyes he was just a fart. A mere nascent soul perfection expert could be killed in seconds. But now, Kang Ming had turned the tables and killed a nascent soul perfection expert under him. This kind of powerful deterrence was not something that Duan Wuzong could compare with. If they fought, it would be best if both sides suffered, so he couldn't help but be afraid. "Haha, at least you know what's good for you." Kang Xiaoming laughed arrogantly. He looked at Su Lingchong beside him and the two of them swaggered over. As expected, Scarface and the others were scared silly by the scene just now. These cruel and ruthless outlaws didn't even dare to move a muscle in front of Kang Xiaoming. Looking at the backs of Kang Ming and Su Lingchong swaggered over, the rest of the people looked at each other. Their faces all had an envious expression. Sure enough, no matter where you go, strength is the most important. Being strong was really awesome. Even the Mountain King could only choose to retreat. At this moment, a man and a woman suddenly walked out of the restless crowd. Looking at their strength, the man was a nascent soul late-stage expert. The woman, on the other hand, was only at the early nascent soul stage. This man and woman followed the footsteps of Kang Ming and Su Lingchong. They did not even look at the scarred man. They gave people the feeling that they were Kang Ming's followers and wanted to fish in troubled waters. "Stop." Scarface's expression suddenly became stern. Being stared at by his malicious gaze, the man and woman who had been hoping to get lucky immediately paled. Their legs involuntarily trembled violently, and they almost knelt on the spot. What are you doing?" The man braced himself. He looked at Scarface with trepidation. "You want to go there? Where are the heavenly treasures? Hand them all over. Otherwise you should know very well what will happen to you." Scarface sneered. This. The man and woman immediately broke out in cold sweat. They hadn't gained anything in the desert for the past few days, so they didn't have any heavenly treasures on them. Otherwise they wouldn't have taken the risk to muddle through. How could they satisfy Scarface? Not willing to take it out? Still can't take it out? You want to muddle through if you can't take out the heavenly treasures? Do you think I'm running a charity, or do you really think I'm blind? Scarface looked at them up and down. His gaze finally fell on the woman, and there was a bit more lust and greed in it. The man and woman were so scared that they almost peed their pants. For a moment they were in a dilemma. They fiercely slapped their own mouths in their heart. They were so hot-headed that they took the risk out of desperation. This was simply too unlucky. However, without the heavenly treasures, it's not like I can't let you pass. Scarface suddenly changed the topic. He pointed at the woman and said, "The woman beside you is quite good. I want her." The man was shocked, and the woman who Scarface had his eyes on turned pale. Although her figure and appearance could only be considered above average, this woman was quite good at dressing up. However, this woman was quite good at dressing herself up. She managed to create an 80% effect with her good looks. No wonder Scarface had his eyes on her. "What up? Hurry up and scram. Are you waiting for me to send you on your way?" Scarface scolded fiercely. The man's face couldn't help turning green and white. He looked at his female companion who was looking at him with a pleading face, and then looked at the ferocious Scarface. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Well, a man doesn't need to worry about not having a wife. I'll give this woman to you as a toll fee." After that, regardless of the desperate wailing of his female companion and the discussion of the people present, the man turned his head and walked away. Soon, he disappeared into the entrance of the 10,000 Years Grand Canyon. "Haha, you're really blind to follow this kind of scum. Well, you don't look like a native of West Island. I haven't eaten meat for decades. I'm lucky today." Scarface laughed. Although most of the people in the trial of West Island were women, he also knew that he didn't dare to do anything to them under normal circumstances. After all, this was the base camp of West Island. If the news really leaked out, the high-level officials of West Island would definitely have a way to kill him, and that would be a big loss. But now that this woman was not a disciple of West Island, there was nothing to be afraid of. When it came to women, the last time he touched a woman was a few decades ago. At that time, there happened to be a female cultivator who couldn't get out. Eventually she fell into his hands. As a result, he and his underlings ravaged her to death. In a burst of exclamations from the crowd, accompanied by the helpless scream of the female cultivator, Scarface actually stripped her clothes in front of so many people and was about to eat her on the spot. Beast? Hoyuti was also scared to the point that her beautiful face turned pale. She was a clean girl and had never seen such a scene. She quickly covered her eyes and didn't dare to look again. Seeing this, Linny couldn't help but frown. Originally, he also thought that since Kang Ming Ming had set a precedent, Scarface's prestige had been greatly reduced. Even if he didn't hand over the heaven materials and earth treasures, he should be able to pass. But now it seemed that he definitely couldn't. If he was the same as this man and woman, then Scarface would definitely ask him for Hoyuti. No matter how he looked at it, even if she was wearing a veil, Hoyuti's beauty was at least 10 times better than the female cultivator in the field. Even a normal man would not let her go, not to mention Scarface and his group of hungry desperados. It seemed that he had to do something today. Linny shook his head lightly. Although Scarface was not a difficult character in his eyes, there were so many people present, and he didn't want to expose his strength in public. But now that the situation had developed to this point, it was probably unrealistic to want to pass in a low profile. Chapter 4700. The tone of his voice carried an obvious hint of fear. Linny looked over and saw that it was actually Kang Ming Ming who had turned back. It turned out that after he left with Su Ling Chong, he did not go far, but instead waited at the entrance of the 10,000-year Grand Canyon. Whoosh! Linny thought for a moment and understood. This guy purposely stayed here and did not leave. He was most likely waiting to see Lin Yi make a fool of himself. Perhaps he still had not given up on Hoyuti. At this moment, Kang Ming Ming had suddenly returned. Scarface thought that he had taken a fancy to this female cultivator, and his heart suddenly became nervous. If this brat opened his mouth and wanted her, then what should he do? Should he fight or not? If he fought, the best result would be that both sides would be injured. At the very least, he would not be able to avoid the opponent's true chi technique. Perhaps he might not even be able to injure both sides. The result could be imagined. But if he did not fight, then wouldn't he lose all his prestige after retreating under the watchful eyes of so many people? How would he be able to collect the toll later? Just as Scarface was hesitating, Kang Xiaoming didn't even look at him. He walked right past him and said lightly, "Don't be nervous, this kind of ordinary makeup doesn't enter my eyes." Scarface was still in a daze, but Kang Xiaoming didn't even look at him. Of course, he would not have nothing better to do. In a situation where the other party had already retreated, he still took the initiative to provoke Scarface. He still wanted to keep this guy to humiliate Lin Yi, and was waiting to see a good joke. How could he bear to deal with Scarface at this time? This was a rare watchdog. Hearing Kang Ming Ming's disdainful tone, Scarface's mouth involuntarily twitched. Although he was somewhat glad, when he looked at this female cultivator who had been stripped naked in front of everyone, he immediately lost his previous libido. After cursing, he casually threw the female cultivator to the side. The eyes of his subordinates immediately lit up, and they laughed strangely as they rushed forward, noisily dragging the female cultivator to an unknown place. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Kang Xiaoming walked up to Hoyuti with large strides. He looked at Lin Yi with disdain, and then turned to Hoyuti with a face full of politeness. "Beauty, you saw what happened just now. If you come with me, that Scarface won't dare touch a single hair on your body. But if you follow this pretentious old man, then you'll end up in a terrible state. With the previous example in front of you, anyone with a bit of wisdom would know what to do. Beauty, what do you say?" "I said it very clearly. I won't form a team with you. You should just give up on it." Hoyuti refused again without saying anything. Her tone was obviously impatient, and she couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "Is there something wrong with this guy's head? I said it so many times, but he still asks?" However, at the same time, Hoyuti glanced at her opponent's high-tech equipment. She couldn't help but feel envious. If only she had something like that. Blast that scar-faced beast into the air. It seems like a beauty's judgment of people is really bad. I already said that this guy is just a pretentious leader who looks good but is useless, yet you still trust him so much. Does he really think he has that kind of strength? Kang Ming Ming's face darkened. He sneered at the two of them and said, "In that case, I won't say anything. You can stay here with this pretentious leader. You can leave now." Hoyuti pouted. For a moment she didn't know how to refute. After all, the scar-faced man on the other side was indeed ferocious, whether it was her or Lin Yi. However, if he wanted to obtain the Thunder Shenratan, he had to pass through the 10,000 Years Great Canyon. Now, he could not even enter the 10,000 Years Great Canyon. What could he do? Hui Yudi couldn't help but look at Lin Yi for help. However, she saw Lin Yi look at the arrogant Kong Ming Ming, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. Who says we can't win? Let's go, let's go. The monkey show is over. It's quite interesting. After saying that, Lin Yi directly walked forward. His expression was leisurely and indifferent. He did not put the Mountain King in front of him in his eyes. The people beside him couldn't help but look at each other. What day was it today? All kinds of great gods appeared. Another person with a shocking tone. Hui Yudi saw this and laughed. After glancing at Kong Ming Ming, she hurriedly followed Lin Yi's footsteps. Since Lin Yi was so confident, it meant that he could deal with that scar-faced man. What was there to worry about? Seeing that Lin Yi and Hui Yudi were getting closer and closer to him with a condescending attitude, the scar-faced man suddenly flew into a rage. He was the strongest early-stage profound ascension expert present. Previously, with the appearance of a strange freak like Kong Ming Ming, he was afraid to provoke him. That was fine. After all, it wouldn't be a big deal. At most, it would damage some prestige. However, after that, not only did someone want to take advantage of the situation, there was actually someone who dared to say that he was going to leave after watching the show. Could it be that he, a dignified expert at the peak of the early stage of profound ascension, was just a monkey show in his eyes? Or was it that he was simply a monkey being played? Brat, I want the beauty beside you. Hurry up and hand her over. The scar-faced man strode in front of Lin Yi and Hui Yudi. As he spoke with a face full of lust, he reached out his hand to touch Hui Yudi's body. Only now did he realize that this veiled woman was actually a rare beauty in this world. Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, Lin Yi in front of him had already slapped him without saying a word. The scar-faced man saw this and immediately laughed in anger. Who did this brat think he was? It would be fine if he used all his strength to launch a sneak attack, but he actually wanted to slap him in front of everyone. Was this guy's brain a pile of shit? The scar-faced man subconsciously wanted to slap back with a sinister smile. His body flickered with the shadow of a dragon and tiger. He had already used the overbearing and fierce dragon-tiger killing fist. It was obvious that he wanted to take Lin Yi's head to establish his prestige. The power of the dragon-tiger killing fist was unquestionable. However, before the scar-faced man could completely attack, Lin Yi had already slapped him in the face. There was also a soul-stirring dragon roar. It was unknown when Lin Yi's hand had condensed a 5 elements killing chi. Accompanied by a crisp sound of flesh, the huge body of the scar-faced man was suddenly like a kite with a broken string. He was slapped away uncontrollably, directly flying more than 10 feet away. He couldn't get up for a long time. The whole audience sucked in a breath of cold air. Everyone looked at Lin Yi with incomparable shock and horror. They were simply on the verge of worshipping him. Chapter 4701. He personally slapped Scarface away, and he did it in such an understated manner. With just one slap he sent a person flying. What does this mean? Even if everyone was already dumbfounded, they could tell that this guy's strength was far above Scarface. Profound Ascension Middle Stage? Peak Profound Ascension Middle Stage? Or even stronger than this. This time, the West Island trial was indeed a place where the elites of all the islands were gathered. The various gods that emerged were really ruthless. However, this was obviously a mystic ascending stage master. How did he get in here? It couldn't be like Scarface, who was trapped here during the trial, right? Many people had already noticed Lin Yi before. This guy was clearly teleported in with them. Not only was everyone dumbfounded, even Hui Yudi, who was standing behind Lin Yi, couldn't help but cover her mouth, and her eyes were full of incredible shock. Even though she already knew that Lin Yi was unfathomable before this, and she had already overestimated Lin Yi's strength, she was still stunned at this time. Lin Yi was clearly only at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. How could he casually slap a peak of the early profound ascension stage? What was wrong with this world? On the other side, after Scarface was slapped away, he groaned on the ground for a long time before he dug himself out of the sunken ground. The side of his cheek that was slapped was swollen high, and it was as swollen as a basketball. Just a moment ago he was still ferocious and powerful, but in the blink of an eye, he fell into such a sorry state. This huge contrast was really a little unacceptable. Scarface looked at Lin Yi with trepidation. When he saw Lin Yi's gaze sweeping over, he quickly shrank his head and pretended to be a grandson. Although he was very unwilling in his heart, since he was promoted to the profound ascension stage, he had never suffered such humiliation. This was simply unbearable. However, he was not stupid. He knew that the other party could send him flying with a casual slap. If they really wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be difficult at all. After being slapped in the face, Lin Fan was stunned. Scarface actually acted like a coward in front of everyone. This guy was a bit more tactful than Lin Yi expected. However, this wasn't a bad thing. Lin Yi didn't have any intention of killing him. Otherwise he wouldn't have just slapped him lightly but would have used his full strength. Although Scarface was indeed an abominable person, with all the atrocious crimes he had committed, no matter how many times he was killed, he deserved to die. However, Lin Yi had no intention of acting for the will of heaven. The cultivation world was a dog-eat-dog world. As long as he did not provoke Lin Yi, no matter what Scarface did, it had nothing to do with him. And the reason why he deliberately spared Scarface's life was actually because he had a deep consideration. The reason was very simple. Whether or not Scarface, that fiendish demon, was present at the door made no difference to him. But to the other trial challengers present, the difference was enormous. It was directly related to whether or not they could enter the 10,000-year Great Canyon. Although the Thunder Mystic Vine was not in the 10,000-year Great Canyon, if too many people entered, it might be a bad thing. But if he let too many people in, things might go awry. He didn't want to leave any hidden dangers for himself at this time. Therefore, he simply spared Scarface's life and let him continue to guard the door here to scare off the other cultivators. Kang Ming Ming looked at Lin Yi with a face full of resentment. This time, he had used the laser cannon with great difficulty to show off. In the end, this guy stole the limelight again. Was there any fucking justice in this world? He really couldn't swallow this anger. Kang Ming Ming angrily wanted to ridicule Lin Yi again. However, this time, before he could speak, Su Lingchong suddenly kicked him from behind. He said impatiently, "Hurry up and get down to business. If you don't want to do it, then take off your armor." Ever since this operation plan was decided, this young Master Su had not had much of a presence. From the beginning to the end, it was basically Kang Ming Ming who took the lead. But along the way he more or less understood how to use this thing and he was looking for a chance to try it. If Kang Ming Ming was not reliable, Su Lingchong could destroy him in minutes. At worst he would do it himself. Even if he could not marry Ning Xuefei, the Princess of West Island, in the end, as long as he could ruin Lin Yi's plan, he would have achieved his goal. Everything else could be negotiated. Yes, please calm down, young Master Su. Kang Ming Ming's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he quickly bowed his head to admit his mistake. He could show off in front of others, but he would not dare to talk back in front of his immediate superior even if he had 10 guts. That would kill him. Kang Ming Ming was not a fool. After glancing at Lin Yi fiercely, Kang Ming had to restrain his unwillingness in his heart. He did not dare to stay any longer and carefully followed Su Lingchong away. What the hell are these two guys doing? Lin Yi looked at the backs of Su Lingchong and Kang Ming Ming, and thoughtfully pinched his chin. Intuition told him that there must be a reason for these two to appear here, but he could not think of any clues at the moment. Maybe they were just like the others, simply to collect treasures in the 10,000 years Grand Canyon? What are you thinking about? Hui Yudi suddenly patted Lin Yi's back. After suppressing the shock in her heart, Lin Yi was still the same Lin Yi. With such a powerful teammate, she was already very confident about getting the Thunder Shen Vine this time. At this moment she was even a little impatient. Oh, nothing. Lin Yi shook his head and turned his head to look at the scarred man who had just raised his head. The scarred man suddenly shivered again and immediately buried his head again, which was the complete opposite of his previous ferocious demeanor. Lin Yi could not help but laugh in his heart. After this guy suffered, it seemed that he was ready to pretend to be a grandson in front of him until the end. As a dignified early-stage profound ascension expert, he was quite tactful. No longer paying attention to the scarred man, Lin Yi immediately prepared to bring Hui Yudi to the 10,000 years Grand Canyon. However, at the last moment when he turned his head, he suddenly caught a glimpse of two familiar figures, Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo. It seemed that the two of them had just arrived and were about to find someone to inquire about the situation. At this time they also happened to see Lin Yi and Hui Yudi, and their faces immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. "Come, you two, come with me." Lin Yi waved at the two of them from afar. Of course, Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo would not refuse. Although they had not fully understood the situation, they knew from the atmosphere that this place was definitely not so easy to pass. Under the envious gazes of the others, Qi Wenhan and Hui Yudi quickly walked towards Lin Yi, while the scarred man and his group of followers, who were blocking between them and Lin Yi, hurriedly got out of the way as if they had seen a ghost, for fear of accidentally provoking Lin Yi. Chapter 4702. If this fiend was forced to make a move again, then they would not even know how they died. Not to mention that Scarface, a peak early-stage profound ascension expert, was sent flying with one move. Even Kong Ming Ming, who looked equally ferocious and terrifying, did not dare to challenge Lin Yi, and could only run away with his tail between his legs. This scene had completely dispelled everyone's thoughts of resistance. They did not know that Su Lingqiong was impatient just now, and thought that he was purely afraid. Even if these followers were desperados, no one was willing to become cannon fodder, especially in this kind of situation where there was no hope. Even the boss Scarface could only pretend to be a grandson, so these subordinates naturally had to pretend even more, or else they would die in vain. After bringing Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo, Lin Yi glanced at everyone one last time, and then led the way into the 10,000-year Great Canyon under respectful gazes. As soon as Lin Yi and the others left, there were immediately people who wanted to follow them in. After all, Scarface had suffered a great loss this time, and could only pretend to be a grandson. For the others, there was no longer any deterrence to speak of. However, before that person could even walk halfway, Scarface abruptly smashed over with a Dragon Tiger Slaughter fist, and it blasted that person to the point not even a trace of him remained on the spot. Scarface once again recovered his ferocious and terrifying appearance, and his methods were so brutal and ruthless that it caused the others to be unable to help but retreat in unison while feeling extremely astounded. I will leave a sentence here: either hand over enough heavenly treasures before entering, or wait for you to come back from inside, hand over half of your gains. You can choose one of the two methods. Don't blame me for not saying the ugly words first. Those who want to take advantage of the chaos to get away with it will die. Scarface roared with a sinister expression. According to his original plan, he was prepared to go back and forth according to the market, extorting these people once when they entered, and extorting them again when they were released. Or if the situation was good, he would simply kill them and take their treasures. This was a true business with no capital. But now he had suffered losses one after another. Especially after Lin Yi slapped him in the face, he'd completely wiped out the last bit of intimidation he had. With so many people glaring at him, if he didn't quickly set the tone, it would cause big trouble. Therefore he had no choice but to take a step back and not force these people into a dead end. Humans were all like this. Once they had no other choice, they might fight to the death against a common enemy. However, once they were given hope, this resistance would immediately vanish. Even if there were one or two hotheads, at least most people would not take the risk out of desperation. Sure enough, Scarface's actions allowed him to regain control of the situation that had gone out of control. After the crowd heard his words, some of them thought about it for a moment before nodding in agreement. The first choice was obviously a trap, but the second choice wasn't impossible. Losing half of their forces was much better than searching for a needle in a haystack in the desert. There was a first one. Very quickly there was a second and a third. Many people accepted Scarface's suggestion on the spot. Of course, there were also some people who felt it was unreliable after thinking about it. They turned around and left unwillingly. The 10,000-year canyon was good, but who knew if Scarface would change his mind and go back on his words? After passing through the small oasis, there was a huge and majestic canyon in front of them. An ancient and austere aura greeted them, causing them to tremble from the depths of their souls. This is the 10,000-year canyon. It looks like a place of dragons and tigers. There should be a lot of heavenly treasures here. Lin Yi looked at the scene in front of him and nodded. Not all parts of the canyon were covered with oases. Although this huge canyon wasn't completely covered with oases, all kinds of plants could be seen everywhere. It was far more lively than the desert outside. Moreover, the spiritual energy was also quite abundant, making people feel refreshed. Yes, but it's still 100 times more dangerous than the outside. You have to be careful with every step or you'll die. Wu Yudi reminded them. And the benefits are always proportional to the risks. Brother Qi Mixia, you have to be careful. Don't just focus on your sweet feelings. Lin Yi looked at the two mischievously. Being teased like this, Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo's faces immediately turned red. After the previous storm, their relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. Right now they were even holding hands. It was obvious that the good deed had been accomplished. Brother Ling, you guys have to be careful too. We'll be leaving first. Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo secretly looked at each other, then immediately said goodbye to Lin Yi. The two of them were at a time when their relationship was rapidly heating up. They only had eyes for each other and couldn't wait to continue their world together. Okay, when you guys come back, if that Scarface is still obstructing you, then wait for me here. Lin Yi smiled. Although he said this, he didn't think that Scarface was an idiot. Based on the style he had displayed before, he would eat anything that he could, and wouldn't let go until the bones were completely crushed. But if he met someone he couldn't handle, he would be very tactful, and would directly act like a coward, without the slightest bit of resistance. From a certain point of view, this Scarface could be considered a person who knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Of course, to put it in another way, it would be called bullying the weak and fearing the strong. And I understand. Brother Chi, Miss Hua, I'll see you later. Chi Wenhan cupped his hands towards the two of them, then immediately turned around and left with Xia Luoluo. After watching the two of them leave, Lin Yi turned to look at Hui Yudi and said, "Where do we go next? Is there a shortest route?" Of course there is. Although it's a canyon that leads to the end, this 10,000-year canyon is several hundred miles wide, and there are many places that you absolutely can't step into. If you don't set a good route, you'll have to take many wrong turns, and it's also very dangerous. Hui Yudi said. Okay, then where do we go now? Lin Yi asked. Over there. Hui Yudi pointed to the right and suddenly became excited. She said with a face full of happiness, "There's a spring there, I want to take a good bath." Lin Yi was speechless. Although it was a bit of a waste of time, she was still a girl and she always had some privileges. After being covered in dust for so long, it was normal for her to want to take a bath. He could only nod and say, "Then let's go there. But time is limited, don't take too long." Got it? Hui Yudi exclaimed with joy. Then like a fairy, she cheered and flew in the direction of the spring. Chapter 4703. Sure enough, Hui Yudi quickly found a clear spring behind the towering rock in front of her. The spring water was extremely clear and pure, and it was overflowing with spiritual energy. Even drinking it would make one feel refreshed, not to mention jumping into it to take a bath. It was definitely a rare enjoyment in the world. Hui Yudi wanted to jump in impatiently, but when she turned around and saw Lin Yi, she immediately blushed and said shyly, You're not allowed to peek. I'll just guard here, all right? I won't look even if you beat me to death." Lin Yi spread his hands and turned around to lean against the big rock. Anyway, with the big rock in the way, he wouldn't be able to see it even if he wanted to. "You won't look even if you beat me to death? Am I that bad?" Hui Yudi muttered with some dissatisfaction. Oh. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What's going on with this girl? Does she want me to look or not? Hui Yudi muttered a few words in a low voice. Seeing that Lin Yi really didn't move, she turned around and walked towards the spring. Her expression seemed to be a little relieved, but also a little disappointed. No one knew what she was thinking in her mind. But before she actually walked in, there was a sudden commotion in the distance. Impressively, some of the other challengers who came later also discovered the spring here, and couldn't help but gather here. Hui Yudi, who was originally full of joy, suddenly wanted to cry but had no tears. Most of these people were male cultivators and she was a girl. With so many people coming at once, how could she take a bath? It wasn't easy for her to find a spring like this, and her heart was filled with reluctance. But if she didn't leave, she wouldn't be able to bathe here. Hui Yudi was in a dilemma, and could only look at Lin Yi pitifully. Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled slightly and gave her a reassuring look. Then he looked at the noisy newcomers with a cold gaze. His tone was indifferent as he said, "I'm taking this place." When everyone heard this, they looked at each other before turning around and leaving without any hesitation. They didn't hesitate at all. Of course, the clear spring water made people happy, but compared to their lives, this little bit of happiness was nothing. Lin Yi was a ferocious god that could even send a peak early-stage profound ascension expert flying with a slap. Killing them was as easy as moving a finger. Who would dare to provoke such a ruthless person? In the blink of an eye, this group of people also fled for their lives. Hui Yudi saw this scene and immediately pursed her lips into a smile. Seeing how overbearing Lin Yi was, she didn't know why, but she was actually very happy in her heart. Although they were both morning geniuses, she was completely different from Yao Jieli. She was definitely not a domineering person. However, it was nice to enjoy the feeling of being domineering occasionally, especially at a time like this. "Go wash it. With me here, no one will dare to come over," Lin Yi said faintly. The boulder behind him couldn't block the entire spring, but it could block a large part of it. Furthermore, there was a depression inside that Hui Yudi could hide in. This way she wouldn't have to worry about being seen. "Oh." Hui Yudi blushed and nodded. She immediately waded through the shallow spring water. She tiptoed and turned behind the rock. As for Lin Yi, he was like a door god standing there with his arms crossed. The other challengers that came one after another looked from afar. Needless to say, they didn't dare to come over. This kind of ruthless person should be kept as far away as possible. They must not provoke him. Otherwise, no matter how many lives they had, it wouldn't be enough to kill them. Even if there were a few courageous people who wanted to come over to take a look, with a glance from Lin Yi, they immediately didn't dare to move. They turned and ran as if they were running for their lives, not daring to have the slightest thought. This was the effect that Lin Yi wanted. He didn't have the mood to waste time with these irrelevant people. While standing guard outside for Hui Yudi, he simply sat down and cultivated. After all, a woman's bath was always very troublesome. He didn't know how long it would take. As long as he constantly released his divine sense, he wouldn't have to worry about any accidents. After an unknown amount of time, Lin Yi suddenly heard Hui Yudi call his name. He couldn't help but ask, "What's the matter? Do you have clothes?" Hui Yudi asked hesitantly. "Clothes? What clothes?" Lin Yi was somewhat puzzled. It's my clothes that haven't been washed yet. I'm asking if you have any clothes that I can wear." Hui Yudi's tone was unexpectedly a bit coquettish. After she reacted, her cheeks couldn't help but turn red. Except for her master, who was both a master and a mother, she had never used this tone to speak to outsiders. Lin Yi was speechless. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he helplessly shook his head and said, "This is the wilderness, where can I find clothes that you can wear? Use your true chi to dry them." Hui Yudi hesitated for a moment and then said in a weak tone, "This is the 10,000-year Grand Canyon. I can't waste my energy on this kind of thing. I saw that you can casually take out pastries, so I wanted to ask if you have any clothes from the secular world." What kind of logic is this? Lin Yi froze at the question. If she could take out pastries, she could take out clothes and clothes from the common world. This girl's logic was truly unimaginable, making it impossible to follow up on her lies. But thinking about it, of course he didn't have ancient clothes for the women of Heaven Stage Island, but he did have clothes from the secular world. Before he left the secular world, Wu Qintian prepared a lot of things for him, including some new clothes for his female friends on Heaven Stage Island. There were all kinds of styles, and even if he used them to open a women's clothing store, it wouldn't be a problem. Lin Yi roughly considered the figures of the women, and after thinking about it, he finally felt that although this girl's figure was a little hotter than Tian Chan's, it was roughly the same. So he buried his head in the jade space for a while and finally found a set of denim sportswear. "There really is something that you can wear, but how do I give it to you?" Lin Yi asked. "Why don't you throw it over?" Hui Yudi suggested. "Throw it over? Then wouldn't it be thrown into the water?" Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly. Then. Hui Yudi was obviously a little hesitant, but in the end she gritted her teeth and said, "Why don't you come over and put it on the side?" "I go over?" Lin Yi was stunned. This girl was so open and she would let him in when she was bathing? It didn't seem like it. After interacting with her for the past few days, although she was a little unpredictable, and they had that kind of awkward and ambiguous encounter before, overall he felt that this girl was quite conservative. Even if she didn't view the barrier between men and women as more important than her life, it was definitely not dispensable. Chapter 4704. All right then. Since she had already said so, Lin Yi, as a man of course, had nothing to be shy about. He immediately took the clothes and walked in. Bypassing the rock, this was the first time he saw the full view of the spring. It was clear and slightly cool with a layer of white mist. It gave off the feeling of a paradise on earth. At this moment, Hui Yudi was curled up in the depression behind the rock. Her whole body was carefully curled up in the water, leaving only her head above the water. She looked at Lin Yi with a blushing face. Because she was bathing, Hui Yudi was naturally not wearing a veil at this moment. This was the first time Lin Yi saw her face. Even though he was used to seeing stunning beauties around him at this moment, he couldn't help but feel as if he was struck by lightning when he suddenly saw this beautiful face. There were only 8 words left in his mind: white as jade, beautiful and flawless. No wonder this chick had to wear a veil. Otherwise, with her appearance, coupled with that seductive and hot body, she would definitely have endless troubles when she came out to train. She could be snatched away at any moment to be the wife of a bandit. Looking at this scene in front of him, Lin Yi couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Her appearance was only one of the reasons why he was stunned, but the more seductive part was still below. Although Hui Yudi's whole body was hidden under the water, the spring water was after all so clear that the bottom could be seen. Without the layer of white mist above, nothing could be hidden at all. However, even with this layer of mist, with Lin Yi's eyesight, he could still vaguely see some of the scenery under the water. If Hui Yudi didn't happen to be hiding in the depression of the rock, and the lower half of her body was blocked by the rock, Lin Yi even suspected that he would have a nosebleed. In fact, at this moment, just looking at Hui Yudi's pure and beautiful face and the creamy white skin on her neck, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little unable to control himself. Especially the indistinct scene below the neck, it gave people endless imagination. If it was any other man with poor willpower, he would have probably jumped down in a fit of beastly rage. Ah, what clothes are these? Yudi was a little shy, especially when Lin Yi came in. She almost wanted to hide, but when she saw the clothes in Lin Yi's hands, his eyes immediately lit up. Women had always been very sensitive to things like clothes. Even if she had never seen clothes from the secular world, she could still easily distinguish between good and bad. You'll know when you put it on. Lin Yi smiled a little unnaturally. Out of a man's instinctive physiological reaction, he couldn't act naturally in this situation at all. After putting the clothes in his hands on the stone beside him, he immediately retreated. Oh. Yudi's eyes lit up as she looked at the set of denim sportswear. She didn't wait for Lin Yi to completely exit before she eagerly drilled out of the water and rushed over like a little girl. In that instant, it was a beautiful scene of hibiscus emerging from clear water. This caused Lin Yi to stagger and his entire person was stunned on the spot. It was only when Yudi herself reacted that Lin Yi hurriedly retreated with a blushing face. His mind was muddled and it was filled with the scene from a moment ago. Shaking his head to get rid of the distracting thoughts lingering in his mind, Lin Yi waited outside for a long time before he heard the sound of Yudi coming out of the water. This was followed by the rustling sound of clothes, which made Lin Yi couldn't help but let his imagination run wild again. After all, the scene from a moment ago was really lingering in his mind. After a while, when Lin Yi involuntarily went astray, a beautiful and refined figure suddenly appeared in front of him. An elegant and refined figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Yudi who had just finished changing her clothes. What? You don't recognize me? Seeing that Lin Yi was staring at her, Yudi couldn't help but whisper with a blushing face, but she didn't know why she felt a little happy in her heart. She even deliberately turned around in front of Lin Yi, pursed her lips and asked, "Do I look good in this?" Yes. Lin Yi nodded. Yudi's beauty was extremely rare. Previously, she was wearing an ancient costume and a veil. Her whole body was covered tightly from head to toe, but it still gave people a very attractive aesthetic feeling. However, now that she had changed into a denim sportswear, it outlined her beautiful figure even more exquisite and well-proportioned. Her very slim figure was 120% seductive. Coupled with her youthful and beautiful face, she was simply a very beautiful woman in the secular world. To be honest, looking at the current Yudi, Lin Yi couldn't help but have a feeling that it was a lifetime ago. Since coming to Heaven Stage Island, he had never seen a beauty dressed like this. Even Han Jingjing and the others also wore ancient costumes when in Rome. He didn't expect to experience this long-lost feeling from this East Continent chick. It had to be said that this chick was really in tune with the secular world. At least if she wore this dress and walked around in the secular world, no one would be able to see through her origins. They would only think that she was born and raised in the secular world. Looking at Lin Yi's expression of being unable to extricate himself, Yudi was not angry. Instead, she was shy and a little proud. Along the way, Lin Yi didn't show the slightest bit of covetousness, which made her a little lacking in self-confidence. But now she finally regained her self-confidence. It seemed that she was not completely unattractive to this guy. "Hey, do you want to go in and take a bath?" Yudi asked with her mouth pouting. "Oh, there's no need." Lin Yi heard her words and shook his head faintly. His mind suddenly regained its clarity. When he looked at Yudi again, his gaze no longer had the lust from before. Taking a bath was like eating. It was not necessary for high-level practitioners. It could only be regarded as a natural habit. Even after a few days of travel in the desert, Lin Yi could use his chi to clean himself with just a thought. Only a girl like Yudi, who was obsessed with cleanliness, would want to take a bath. Yudi pouted and looked at Lin Yi up and down with a strange look. There seemed to be a bit of regret in her eyes. Lin Yi was stunned by her look. He didn't know what this chick was thinking in her head. He could only say, "Let's get ready to go. Don't you plan to wear a veil?" Yudi was startled. Only then did she remember that she didn't wear a veil. Her cheeks instantly turned bright red. Didn't that mean that her appearance was clearly seen by the other party? Looking at Yudi hurriedly putting on a veil, Lin Yi couldn't help but be speechless. It turned out that this chick didn't realize this from the beginning to the end. Once again on the road, the atmosphere between the two of them became a little strange for some reason. It was just like after the awkward scene before. Yudi's face was red and she lowered her head in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking about. In any case, she was silent and didn't say a word. Chapter 4705. He could see that she was a little out of sorts, and the 10,000-year canyon was obviously different from the desert outside. It was full of vitality, which often meant danger, and he had to be on guard. Just like the humanoid vine, it might look like an ordinary vine on the outside, but it would become a ferocious and terrifying monster in this place. Every step here had to be careful, and it was very dangerous to be distracted like Huiyuti. But it was also thanks to Lin Yi keeping an eye on them from behind, noticing the slightest movement. They were able to avoid those hidden threats a couple of times. Otherwise, with Huiyuti's current confused state, even if she was lucky enough not to die, she would have wasted a lot of time. Although there might not be no gains, at least there would be no Thunder Shen Vine. Walking behind Huiyuti, facing such a seductive beauty, any man would unconsciously glance at her, and Lin Yi was no exception. He thought that after Huiyuti changed into such a sexy denim sportswear, she would attract some unnecessary trouble. After all, there were countless perverts like Kong Ming Ming. However, to his surprise, perhaps because the route he had chosen was relatively remote, he did not encounter anyone along the way. It was rare for him to meet one or two people, but when they saw a demon like him, they instinctively hid far away. Who would dare to come up and cause trouble? After walking like this for about 2 hours, a towering mountain suddenly appeared in front of them. Lin Yi was shocked. He thought that the 10,000-year canyon was a flat plain. He did not expect there to be a mountain in the canyon. Although it could not be compared to the mountains on both sides of the canyon, the pressure of the mountain in front of them was not small. It almost occupied most of the 10,000-year canyon, leaving only a narrow path on the left. Huiyuti took out the map and looked at it. Without saying anything, she walked in the direction of the narrow path on the left. It seemed that she was going to go around the mountain in front of them. However, Lin Yi did not move. Suddenly, he stopped and asked thoughtfully, "What is that?" Huiyuti was stunned. She turned around and saw Lin Yi staring at the mountain on the right. Her expression tightened and she said, "That is Tiandao Mountain." Tiandao Mountain? Lin Yi looked into the distance. He didn't know why, but there was an inexplicable obsession in his mind that made him want to get closer, as if something was calling him. He immediately said, "Let's go and take a look." "No, don't go." Huiyuti hurriedly cried out in alarm. What happened? Lin Yi looked at her reaction with a strange expression. He didn't know why this girl had been silent the whole way, but why was she so excited when she heard that they were going to Heavenly Dao Mountain? "I can't go. You must not go." Huiyuti shook her head in horror. She looked at Lin Yi with pleading eyes and said, "Listen to me, let's go around the small path on the left, okay? Although it's also very dangerous and we'll definitely encounter some terrifying existences on the way, it's much safer than going to Tiandao Mountain." What? Lin Yi frowned slightly. The obsession in the unseen world became stronger and stronger. Although he could still restrain it with his willpower, if it were someone else they would not be able to control it. Perhaps they would have already walked over involuntarily. "Tiandao Mountain is the only place that Master warned me not to go near." Huiyuti looked at Tiandao Mountain in the distance with a serious expression and said slowly, "You also know that this is the primordial battlefield. Then do you know where the core of the trial is?" Could it be Tiandao Mountain? Lin Yi's eyelid twitched. That's right, Tiandao Mountain is the core of the primordial battlefield. Legend has it that the strongest existences of the primordial era fought here. As for the other places, they are at most the stands of the primordial battlefield. Huiyuti's face was filled with awe. She paused and said, "Do you know how this 10,000-year canyon came to be?" "How did it come to be?" Lin Yi asked. Originally, this place was level with the outside world and there was no canyon at all. However, after an earth-shattering battle, the entire foundation below was smashed and collapsed, resulting in the 10,000-year canyon. Only the Tiandao Mountain under the feet of those peak existences was not directly smashed because it was protected by their aura. Instead, it sank together and became what it is today. Of course, this is only a legend. Whether it is true or not, there is no way to verify it. Huiyuti said. If it is true, then the people who fought here are really extraordinary. Lin Yi looked at the surrounding 10,000-year canyon and exclaimed. Carefully sensing it, he could feel the remnant aura of the array that was everywhere. This aura was so ancient that it had merged with the surrounding heaven and earth. Ordinary people would not be able to detect it at all. It was very likely that it was passed down from the primordial era. For a mere remnant aura to remain here, it was evident how powerful the array was. However, even with the protection of such a powerful array, this place was still blasted into the 10,000-year canyon. The strength of the instigators was evident. However, after listening to Huiyuti, not only did Lin Yi not have any intention of retreating, but he also wanted to go to Tiandao Mountain to take a look. This was the core of the trial, the primordial land. If he just went around like this, wouldn't it be too regretful? Looking at Lin Yi's eager expression, Hui Yudi's eyes became more and more worried. She suddenly asked, "Is it because you really want to go over and take a look? It seems like something is attracting you." "How do you know?" Lin Yi was shocked. "It's not only you. According to the information my master got from the higher-ups of West Island, in fact, many people will be like this when they arrive here. They will unconsciously get closer to Tiandao Mountain. Every time the trial opens, many people will go there. However, after that, most people never return." Hui Yudi looked at Tiandao Mountain from afar. There was some fear between her eyebrows, but there was also a faint yearning. If it wasn't for her master repeatedly reminding her not to get close to Tiandao Mountain, she might have already gone there like the others. "If I didn't guess wrong, Tiandao Mountain is probably the legendary place where you can get the primordial era's inheritance, right?" Lin Yi frowned slightly. Chapter 4706. "I think so too, but it's because of this that it's very dangerous." Lao Ai, Hui Yudi nodded and looked worriedly at Lin Yi. "Although the ancient inheritance is tempting, it's definitely not a joke. Even if you're lucky enough to encounter it, according to my master, it might not be a good thing. It's very likely that you'll lose your life. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people trapped here every time. Even so, I still want to go and take a look." Lin Yi pondered for a moment and said. He wasn't someone who would be easily confused or swayed. Not only was his divine sense strong, but more importantly, his willpower was strong enough. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until he escaped from the hands of the West Mountain Old Master. This time he was very sure that the Heavenly Dao Mountain in front of him was the place he wanted to go. He didn't know why, but he had to go. Hui Yudi looked strangely at Lin Yi and couldn't help but feel awkward. She said so much, but in the end she still couldn't persuade Lin Yi. Although they were temporary partners, this kind of thing could only be decided by Lin Yi himself. Other than that, it was useless no matter what she said. "Why don't you wait for me here?" Lin Yi thought for a moment and said. This suggestion actually made him feel a little ashamed. After all, he said he would go with Hui Yudi to find the Thunder Shin Vine, but he had to go to the Heavenly Dao Mountain halfway. Not only would it be a waste of time, the key was that he might not be able to return. This was equivalent to standing Hui Yudi up. "All right, I'll go with you," Hui Yudi suddenly said. "You're going too? How can that be?" This unexpected sentence immediately gave Lin Yi a big fright. If he let her accompany him, then he might cause her to lose her life. Lin Yi couldn't afford that. "Why not? You can go, but I can't? What kind of logic is that?" Hui Yudi rolled her eyes at him. She said so much just now not only to persuade Lin Yi, but also to persuade herself, because she also had this inexplicable impulse in her heart. Now that she couldn't persuade Lin Yi, she couldn't get the Thunder Shen Vine by herself. He might as well follow them to Heaven Path Mountain to take a look. Anyways, he might not die. Lin Yi was speechless. He looked deeply at Hui Yudi and nodded. "All right, let's go together. Be careful." Hui Yudi nodded heavily. After the two of them made up their minds, they immediately changed their route and headed towards the Heavenly Dao Mountain. As they got closer and closer, both Lin Yi and Hui Yudi couldn't help but feel an indescribable feeling of amazement. It was fine when they were far away. Even though they knew that this was the Heavenly Path Mountain, there wasn't anything special about it from afar. But now that they were closer, the scenery was vastly different from before. This Heavenly Dao Mountain was far more dilapidated than what he had seen before. It was even in a precarious situation. If it wasn't for the side of the 10,000-year canyon's cliff, it might have already collapsed. That was not the strangest part. What was truly terrifying was that the surroundings of this Heavenly Dao Mountain were actually enveloped by a blood-red mist. He had roamed the South Continent for so long. Lin Yi had seen sea mist, miasma, and the like, but this was the first time he had seen this blood-red mist. He thought that this was an ancient battlefield, where countless powerful ancient beings were buried. Normal people would subconsciously associate this blood-red mist with blood, but there was no smell of blood here. After such a long time, it would be normal even if the smell of blood had disappeared. In fact, if there was still the smell of blood now, it would really be strange. But for some reason, this blood-red mist made Lin Yi subconsciously think of the scene he had seen before. The blood-red moon. Not to mention anything else, at least this blood-red mist that enveloped the Heavenly Dao Mountain was exactly the same as the blood-red mist that enveloped the waning moon. It was very likely that they were the same thing, but there was no way to verify it. Suppressing the bewilderment in his heart at this moment, whether it was Lin Yi or Hui Yudi, the inexplicable impulse in their hearts was more than 100 times stronger than before. It was almost as if it was urging them to move forward without stopping. If their footsteps were slightly slower, it would heavily hammer their hearts. causing them to subconsciously speed up their footsteps. Lin Yi himself was still fine, and his mind was still as clear as before. But Hui Yuti's gaze was a little dazed. At the beginning she was still carefully following behind Lin Yi, but now she had impressively passed by Lin Yi and was walking forward quickly. Seeing that Hui Yuti's footsteps were getting faster and faster, and she was even gradually trotting, Lin Yi's heart was shocked, and he hurriedly wanted to catch up to her. After all, this feeling was really not right, and he was even a little regretful. If anything happened to Hui Yuti here, he would definitely not be able to absolve himself from the blame. The blood-red fog was close at hand, and Lin Yi hurriedly sped up his footsteps to catch up. But before he could pull Hui Yuti back, her figure suddenly dashed forward, and she actually used her martial arts technique with all her might. In just a moment she had dashed into the blood-red fog. Lin Yi was stunned, and in the next moment he had already chased after her. Then his body suddenly trembled, and before he could clearly see the scene in front of him, a powerful torrent of consciousness had already surged over, and incomparably messy images quickly flashed through his mind. This scene was familiar, and when he first encountered the remnant of the giant electric eel's obsession, so many memory fragments suddenly surged into his mind. He did not expect to encounter such a thing again today. Especially when these countless memory fragments were combined together, the sequence of events gradually became clear, and the scene in his mind shocked Lin Yi even more. It was really the giant electric eel. Originally he was still worried about Hui Yuti's condition, but after seeing the giant electric eel, Lin Yi's entire body suddenly froze in shock, and his entire mind involuntarily immersed in the memory fragments in his mind, unable to extricate himself. At this moment he finally understood that the thing that had previously attracted him to this place was probably the obsession of this giant electric eel, and it had formed a resonance with the remnant obsession in his mind. Lin Yi did not know if this giant electric eel at this moment would be the same one he had encountered before, because it was almost the same size, and it was difficult to distinguish from its appearance. But at least one thing was certain: there must be a connection between him and this giant electric eel. After a moment, the huge and messy memory fragments that had merged into Lin Yi's mind finally merged into one, and accompanied by the ancient and wild aura that assaulted his face, the scene slowly unfolded. The location was still at this heavenly mountain, but looking around all the mountains looked small, and all the places that entered his eyes were extremely familiar scenes of the desert, but there was no such thing as this 10,000-year-old canyon. Chapter 4707. When the memory fragment appeared, it was already dark. When he saw the scene in the sky, Lin Yi's pupils shrank, and his heart skipped a beat. Blood-colored crescent. He saw the blood-colored crescent again. Previously, Lin Yi only knew that the blood-colored crescent was an inauspicious sign, so he didn't take it to heart. But now that he saw it again in the memory fragment, especially when he realized that the blood-colored mist that enveloped Tiandao Mountain was exactly the same as the one in the sky, this feeling suddenly became a little subtle. Somehow, intuition told Lin Yi that this might be an omen, an extraordinary omen. Returning to the ground, when he saw the scene at the peak of Tiandao Mountain clearly, Lin Yi's eyelids suddenly twitched wildly. Except for the empty space in the middle, there was a dense group of existences gathered around it. Among them were human cultivators, spirit beasts, and even the shadows of super sea beasts. All of them were majestic and powerful, and among them was the giant electric eel. But for some reason, among these powerful beings, the giant electric eel seemed to be a very small existence. These terrifying existences formed a circle from a distance, and they were all wary of each other. All of them stared nervously at the empty space in the middle, and no one knew what they were waiting for. The memory fragment was not complete. After an unknown period of time, the scene suddenly flashed, and when it became clear again, it was a horrifying scene from hell. There were mountains of corpses and seas of blood everywhere, and fierce battles were happening in the sky and on the ground. Humans against humans, humans against spirit beasts against sea beasts against sea beasts. It was an unparalleled super chaotic battle. It was impossible to tell who was friend and who was enemy. Perhaps they were fighting side by side a moment ago, but in the next moment, they would immediately kill each other from behind. All of the existences were killing like crazy, and they would not stop until they were dead. It was unknown when this terrifying chaotic battle began, and it was also unknown where it would end, but from the scene at the beginning, from the beginning of the memory fragment, Lin Yi could vaguely guess that they were probably fighting for something. Something that could make so many powerful beings fall into a frenzy was certainly not something in the mortal world. It was just that he didn't know what it was. The empty space in the middle had long been unrecognizable, and it was a mess. He didn't know what had happened there or if there was nothing there at all. If the memory fragment was complete, he should be able to see it clearly, but unfortunately it was incomplete. In a chaotic battle, it was either you die or I live. Watching one after another fall, Lin Yi could not help but swallow his saliva. He was completely shocked by the doomsday scene. Before this, the highest level of battle that Lin Yi had ever seen was the battle between the 5 Poisons Flood Dragon and the giant electric eel. Both were super existences that were at least above the sea-splitting stage. In anyone's eyes, this was already a pinnacle battle, but that battle was nothing compared to the scene in his mind. And in the entire super chaotic battle, the focus of Lin Yi's attention was unconsciously focused on the giant electric eel. There was always an inexplicable origin that connected them together. Its huge body constantly drew deep purple electric arcs, and the giant electric eel wandered in the chaotic battlefield, waiting for a target to be targeted. Basically, whether it was humans, spirit beasts, or sea beasts, as long as they were struck by this deep purple electric arc, they would die on the spot without any suspense. In the end, there was only the same ending, being swallowed by the giant electric eel. Others might not know, but for the giant electric eel, this place had obviously become an excellent hunting ground. Usually, ambushing for 100 years would not be able to encounter a top-quality prey, especially an existence that had reached the sea-splitting stage. But now, there were many of them everywhere. In particular, its deep purple electric arcs were extremely lethal, and they arrived in an instant, not giving people a chance to react at all. This place was simply a place for it to take whatever it wanted. However, after the giant electric eel ate more than a dozen prey in succession, the situation finally changed. A human cultivator with a giant sword on his back stared at it, and a huge overwhelming pressure followed. Before, he could be so relaxed because of the sneak attack, but now it was different. After realizing the crisis, the giant electric eel shot a deep purple electric arc that was as thick as a bucket. Not only was it instantaneous, but it was also close to the speed of light. Unless one could predict the future and make a prediction, this move could not be avoided at all. One could only take it head-on. The human expert did not dodge and let the deep purple electric arc hit his body. However, his real chi shield flashed and blocked it. Then he pulled out the giant sword on his back, and with a sudden slash, a terrible sword chi blasted on the head of the giant electric eel. The whole process did not even have a flight trajectory, and it was even more untraceable than the deep purple electric arc. After being hit on the head by this invincible sword chi, the giant electric eel suddenly suffered a loss, and a shallow sword mark was left on its head. Although this was not a serious injury, it still aroused its fierceness. With a low roar, the deep purple electric arc spread in all directions. Wherever it passed, there was nothing strange. It seemed that it simply dissipated into the air. The human expert looked at this scene with some fear. However, before he could react, a deep purple lightning that was almost black suddenly fell from the sky, and instantly penetrated his real chi shield. With just this, a super expert above the sea-splitting stage was directly smashed into charcoal. Lin Yi looked at this amazing scene and was completely stunned. He had already experienced the horror of the giant electric eel. Back then, he had fought with the 5 Poisons Flood Dragon at the bottom of the sea. There was no doubt that its strength was terrible. However, everything was far less shocking than this. A black lightning falling from the sky and killing an existence of the same level was simply the legendary Heaven's Punishment. To be precise, this was probably much more terrible than the Heaven's Punishment. At least, no matter how powerful the Heaven's Punishment was, it was impossible to kill a sea-splitting stage expert in one fell swoop, let alone an existence above them. After the black lightning killed the human expert, the giant electric eel did not stay idle because at this moment, another 3 existences of the same level were staring at it. The woman in white who was playing the zither on the ground, the 9-headed ancient snake demon, and an unknown super sea beast. Each of them was an existence above the sea-splitting stage. At this moment, because of the movement just now, they were staring at the giant electric eel. Perhaps because of fear, the 3 of them chose to join forces to besiege it. Chapter 4708. The giant electric eel was severely injured in an instant, but it did not fall. Instead, it let out a ferocious roar and shrouded the entire area with an electric field again. However, this time, it wasn't just one bolt of black lightning that fell from the sky. Instead, there were dozens of them plowing through the entire Heavendao Mountain. The primordial battlefield, which was already filled with wretched souls, was now filled with corpses. At the same time that the black lightning destroyed the world, Lin Yi's body suddenly trembled. Maybe it was an illusion or maybe it was real, but he felt that he had been struck by one of the black lightning. At this moment he could even clearly see that there were terrifying electric currents running wildly throughout his body. His bodily functions were instantly destroyed, and all his senses were completely gone. Lin Yi's mind suddenly went blank. Other than his primordial spirit, his physical body was struck for no reason. Was he dead? Dead? What kind of death is this? The ghost's disdainful laughter suddenly sounded in his mind. If this is considered dead, I would have died 108,000 times. Lin Yi was shocked. He was completely immersed in the memory fragment and did not expect the ghost to join in the fun. He hurriedly asked, "Then what is this? Why do I feel that my whole body is not mine? I don't know where you got the luck to be favored by a super sea beast. This is a great opportunity." The ghost's tone was filled with disbelief. A great opportunity? What do you mean? Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. At this moment he had completely lost control of his body, which made him tremble with fear. He was struck by the black lightning for no reason. Where did this so-called opportunity come from? You still don't understand? It's just an inherited memory fragment in the sea of consciousness. Do you think that under normal circumstances, there would be lightning striking you? The ghost kept him in suspense and asked instead of answering. This shouldn't be normal? Lin Yi shook his head. This situation was somewhat similar to watching a 3D movie. Thinking about it carefully, it felt like something had popped out of the screen. That's why I said it's fate. I'm afraid it's the remnant will of the electric eel you encountered before, and it resonated with this one, causing the phenomenon to happen. The ghostly thing speculated thoughtfully. Then I'm just unlucky. Even if I didn't receive any actual damage, you call being scared a big deal? Lin Yi didn't know what to say. So it was because he had a lightning-attracting formation on him. That was why he had materialized the scene in the other party's memory fragments and projected it over. What an undeserved calamity. Kid, you really don't know how lucky you are. Weren't you lamenting about not being able to truly obtain the electric eel's inheritance last time? Now that I've given you a chance, you're still not satisfied? The ghostly thing snorted. What? Senior, are you saying that I can obtain its inheritance just by being struck by it like this? Lin Yi was pleasantly surprised. The giant electric eel was no weaker than the 5-poison flood dragon. The scene just now, in particular, made him shudder from the depths of his soul. If he could obtain its inheritance this time, wouldn't he be able to master a heaven-defying killing move that was comparable to the 5 elements killing aura? I'm just saying that there's a possibility. The specifics will depend on your luck. I don't have to say any more nonsense. You'll know after checking the situation in your body, the ghostly thing said. Upon hearing this, Lin Yi hurriedly used his divine sense to open his internal vision. The current situation immediately made him speechless. He still couldn't feel anything in his body. From time to time he could see dangerous electric arcs flashing across his body. Wherever these electric arcs passed, his flesh would be scorched black. Especially those fragile meridians, which would basically explode on the spot when the electric arcs passed by. There was no exception. Lin Yi's heart was pounding. If this continued, his body would be electrocuted into charcoal in minutes. Could it be that he would be like a ghostly thing from now on? Could he only rely on his primordial spirit to live? If ordinary people saw this scene, most of them would probably be scared to death. However, after a moment of shock, Lin Yi calmed down again and turned to re-examine the horrifying scene in his body. After careful observation, he finally found an exciting phenomenon. Although the parts damaged by the electric arcs were scorched black in a short period of time and seemed to be necrotic, after a moment, he found that these places were slowly exuding vitality, as if they were reborn after death. The originally scorched black places could break out of the cocoon and be reborn. Not only could it restore vitality, but it also gave Lin Yi a feeling that it was even stronger than before. Watching his body being destroyed by the electric arcs over and over again, but then spontaneously recovering again and again like a cockroach, Lin Yi was overjoyed. He couldn't help but think of the several times he had tempered his body in the stone door of the cave. Yes, these electric arcs were indeed extremely dangerous. If one was not careful, one would die. However, as long as one could survive, one would eventually be reborn and reborn. I don't know what to say about your talent, kid. You're obviously just a human, but your tenacious vitality is almost as strong as us spirit beasts. I'm afraid ordinary spirit beasts can't compare to you. Are you the illegitimate child of the spirit beast king? The ghostly thing sighed and laughed strangely. When Lin Yi heard this, his face immediately darkened. You're the illegitimate child of the spirit beast king. Your whole family is the illegitimate child of the spirit beast king. Since his physical body could withstand the lightning tempering, Lin Yi finally relaxed and returned his attention to the memory fragment. Naturally, his focus was still on the giant electric eel. Although the giant electric eel suffered a great loss when it was attacked by 3 beings of the same level as it, in the face of its super killer move that could destroy heaven and earth, whether it was the woman playing the zither, the hydra, or the unknown super sea beast, none of them had a good ending. Even if they weren't killed on the spot, they were all seriously injured and on the verge of collapsing. The giant electric eel's attack was successful. Lin Yi thought that it would definitely try to kill the 3 fellows who had joined forces to attack it. However, unexpectedly, its next move was to turn around and run. Watching the giant electric eel fly away, Lin Yi was dumbfounded. Only then did he remember that this fellow was also seriously injured and was on the verge of dying. Although it looked like it still had the strength to kill them, this was not a one-on-one fight. There was no telling when a strong enemy would appear next to you and take your life at any time. At the beginning, the sneak attack was successful. Now that the situation was not good, it ran away without any hesitation. Lin Yi really didn't expect the giant electric eel to be so cunning. He thought it would use its strength to fight to the end. Chapter 4709. At this moment he looked at the zither girl, the hydra, and the super sea beast. They could only watch helplessly as the giant electric eel escaped. Instead they got themselves into big trouble. When it rains it pours. They had actually been targeted by other terrifying existences. This chaotic battle lasted for an unknown period of time. No one knew who had the last laugh. In any case, Lin Yi could not possibly know the result. He also did not know what the fate of the giant electric eel was. This was because when he watched half of it, this huge memory fragment suddenly shattered. The obsession that had been calling him before also disappeared. The world instantly returned to peace. Phew! Lin Yi let out a long breath. He suddenly woke up from the memory. He looked around with a surprised expression. He was drenched in cold sweat. He felt like he had just had a nightmare. Fortunately, he had watched the memory fragment from the perspective of a bystander. Otherwise, if he had been there in person, he would not have needed to be attacked by those terrifying existences. Just the physical pressure alone would have crushed him into pieces. Subconsciously looking around, Lin Yi suddenly froze. He finally reacted. He did not know when his body had returned to normal. In fact, it should be said that he had been reborn and had become stronger. Lin Yi checked his body curiously, and realized that his body's strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Even his meridians were much more resilient than before, and this wasn't the most shocking thing to him. His body was stronger than 10 years of training, but that wasn't what shocked him the most. What really shocked Lin Yi was the surging vital qi in his meridians. There was a faint trace of the power of thunder and lightning. Originally, you were a freak of the 5 elements and 7 attributes. Now, you have become a freak of the 5 elements and 8 attributes. If the attribute of your spiritual root is tested, the world will be in chaos. The ghostly thing sighed. Senior, are you saying that I have the thunder attribute? Lin Yi said with some disbelief. Although he felt that it was inconceivable, at this moment he could clearly feel the power of thunder and lightning in his body. There was no doubt about this. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The 5 elemental spiritual roots were complete, and at the same time, it also possessed the 2 ethereal attributes of ice and mist. Now there was an extremely rare thunder property. Lin Yi suddenly felt that he had made a big profit in the trial of West Island this time. Even if he couldn't get the Thunder Shen Ratan later, the extra thunder property alone would far surpass all the treasures of heaven and earth, which couldn't be obtained even if he begged for it. Not bad. It's all thanks to that electric shock just now. It seems like that big electric eel really wanted to pass on its inheritance to you. It even flattened such an obstacle for you. With your comprehension ability, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to cultivate its lightning techniques. The ghostly thing cackled. Lin Yi's eyes lit up when he heard this. He had been longing for the giant electric eel's peerlessly powerful thunder and lightning killer move for a long time. How could he hold back after hearing this? He couldn't wait to try it out for the first time. Not to mention the earth-shattering heavenly punishment move, just the flash of the deep purple electric arc would give him another powerful trump card. Chi-chi. Although it was his first attempt, after a short while the power of thunder and lightning swimming in his meridians had been successfully gathered by him. Electric arcs flashed on his fingertips, and they gathered more and more, gradually covering his whole palm. From a distance, it looked like he was wearing a thunderbolt glove, giving people an extremely unreal sci-fi feeling. Why is it blue? Lin Yi looked at the jumping electric arcs in his palm and frowned. The most common electric arcs of the giant electric eel were dark purple, and the killer move Heavenly Punishment was even black. Why was it an ordinary blue in his hand? The deterrent feeling suddenly weakened by 10 levels. The ghostly thing burst into laughter. If it had a physical body, it would have been rolling on the ground by now. It laughed so hard that it couldn't catch its breath. Boy, you really make me laugh to death. Thunder and lightning is the innate ability of the big electric eel, and its strength and realm are already above the sea-splitting stage. That's why it can emit dark purple and even black electric arcs. You're just a human in the nascent soul stage and you want to be like it? Are you kidding me? Hearing the ghostly thing say that, Linny couldn't help but blush. It seemed that he was indeed a bit whimsical. The giant electric eel could rely on dark purple electric arcs to sneak attack and kill sea-splitting stage experts. With his current strength, it was really too much to want to make such a killer move. For Lin Yi, who had just entered the sect, it was already quite good to be able to master the most basic blue electric arcs. As for turning the electric arcs into dark purple, it meant that the power would increase by at least 10,000 times. This was not something that a mere nascent soul stage could do. Not to mention humans, even spirit beasts with thunder and lightning talent couldn't do it. As for the black thunder and lightning that was like heavenly punishment, before reaching the sea-splitting stage, this kind of thing could only be thought of in the mind. It was too far away. He felt the power of the thunder and lightning in his hand. It was more than enough to deal with ordinary people, but it wasn't enough to deal with high-level cultivators. It was too far away from his expectation that it would be comparable to the 5 elements murderous chi. Linny sighed slightly. It seemed that he had to diligently cultivate in the future. Otherwise, this thunder and lightning killer move that he had high hopes for would only become a dispensable burden in the future. That would be too much of a waste. Putting away the electric arcs on his palm, Lin Yi finally had the time to look around. This heavenly Dao mountain, apart from being shrouded in a blood-red fog, actually didn't have any special place. There weren't any plants in sight, only a large area of potholes. It seemed that it was the traces left behind by the great battle in the ancient times. Apart from the potholes, what surprised Lin Yi was that there were many people sitting cross-legged in this place. It seemed that every one of them was in a state of enlightenment. Some were surprised, some were smiling, and some were frowning. Everyone's expression was different. The only thing they had in common was that they seemed to be immersed in some kind of illusion and couldn't extricate themselves. If there was no accident, they were most likely like Lin Yi, attracted by some kind of existence's soul obsession. There was a large crowd of people. Lin Yi thought that these were the participants who walked faster than him. However, after he roughly estimated the number of people, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. The number of people sitting here far exceeded the number of people who participated in this trial. In other words, most of these people had been sitting here for several years, decades, or even hundreds of years. If it was just a simple inheritance of obsession, generally a few days would be enough. A year was the limit. However, these people had been sitting here for decades or even hundreds of years. Many of them had even become corpses. There was only one explanation: they were trapped here and couldn't extricate themselves. Chapter 47:10. No wonder this place was a place of death. Linny couldn't help but sigh. Although this place had a kind of attraction to him because of the obsession of the giant eel, it couldn't really control his consciousness, let alone make him unable to extricate himself. However, the people here were different. They had already lost themselves. Unspecified currency. Linny was a little emotional. He didn't intend to touch these people. Everyone had their own opportunities. Whether they obtained the inheritance or died, it had nothing to do with Linny. However, there was one exception. No matter what, Linny had to bring Hoyuti out of this place. After all, this place was too confusing. Since Hoyuti came in because of him, he naturally had the responsibility to bring her out. He couldn't let her die like the others. Lin Yi scanned the crowd and found Hoyuti's figure at the edge. At this time, this girl was also frowning. Even when Lin Yi walked in front of her and called her, she didn't respond at all. Lin Yi suddenly hesitated. Hoyuti's situation wasn't very good, but what if she was obtaining some ancient inheritance? If he interrupted her, wouldn't it ruin her good thing? Forget it. In a place like this, if you want to obtain the inheritance from the endless resentment and obsession, maintaining your self-awareness is the most basic condition. Otherwise, you can only sit here and wait for death. Do you think this chick can wake up on her own? The ghostly thing sneered at the right time. Linny made up his mind. Without saying anything, he directly carried Hoyuti and left. He didn't have the slightest reluctance to leave this place. Anyway, he had already obtained what he wanted. After a moment, Linny carried Hoyuti out of the range of Tiandao Mountain. As soon as they left the shroud of the blood-colored fog, Hoyuti immediately woke up. She found that she was carried on Lin Yi's shoulder. Immediately she let out a scream. Linny was shocked by her high decibel. His hand trembled and he almost dropped her to the ground. With great difficulty he stabilized his body. In the end he found that the place his hand touched was a little soft. He was stunned on the spot. "Big pervert. Put me down." Huiyuti was so embarrassed that her cheeks were about to bleed. She struggled with all her might on Lin Yi's shoulder. Lin Yi quickly put her down. Seeing that she was so angry that her face was red, he could only explain with embarrassment, "I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose." "You're not careful." "Forget it." Huiyuti quickly interrupted him, afraid that he would say something embarrassing. She looked Lin Yi up and down and took the opportunity to change the topic. "Look at you, why aren't you affected at all?" "Oh? You knew you were being affected?" Lin Yi looked at Huiyuti strangely. He thought that she would be ignorant, but he didn't expect her to be conscious. "Of course I do. In fact, I have memories from the beginning to the end, but I don't know why, but I just can't extricate myself. It wasn't until you carried me out that I truly woke up," Huiyuti said with a red face. "So that's how it is. I wasn't affected. Maybe it's because my willpower is stronger. Also, after I obtained some benefits, this place lost its attraction to me." Lin Yi gave a general explanation. He didn't go into detail about what he experienced. "You still want to keep secrets from me? Petty." Huiyuti snorted unhappily. Lin Yi immediately smiled bitterly. "What do you mean keep secrets from you? After just a few days of interaction, this girl really didn't treat him as an outsider. They weren't familiar enough to share such secrets, right?" Although he felt that it was a little ridiculous seeing Huiyuti's angry look, Lin Yi could only say, "Actually, it's not really a secret. I just obtained some enlightenment on this heavenly Tao mountain, but this kind of thing can't be said in a few words, let alone explained clearly." It was an excuse he had no other choice and half of it was true. After all, Lin Yi couldn't possibly tell this girl everything he'd been through, could he? It'd be a huge problem if she were to spill the beans, and it'd be a good thing for both of them to just brush it off like this. "Alright, at least you have some sense." Huiyuti nodded her head in disappointment. Although there was still some curiosity in her eyes, at least she wouldn't get to the bottom of it in the short term. Looking back at the heavenly Tao mountain behind them, Lin Yi and Huiyuti looked at each other and immediately continued on their way. The previous bath and the twists and turns in the heavenly Tao mountain added up to a lot of time, and they had to make up for it as soon as possible. Although the 10,000-year Great Canyon was much more dangerous than the outside world for Lin Yi, these roadblocks were not much of a threat. Under his omnipresent divine sense, most of them could be avoided early on. Even if there were a few that couldn't be avoided, he could easily kill them in one move, so their journey was quite smooth. Other than the strange local specialties, like the dummy vine, Lin Yi and Huiyuti would occasionally see one or two other trial takers. These people obviously came from the side of the heavenly Tao mountain. Otherwise, Lin Yi believed that most of them would sit on the heavenly Tao mountain until they died instead of walking in front of the two of them. After these people noticed Lin Yi and Huiyuti, they all chose to stay far away from them. After all, the slap that sent Scarface flying was deeply engraved in their hearts. No one dared to provoke such a fierce guy. Even if they got a little closer, they would be afraid of dying a wrongful death. So, the farther they stayed, the better. Finally, after a long and arduous journey of 5 days, Lin Yi and Huiyuti successfully crossed the 10,000-year Great Canyon and arrived at the end of the canyon, where there was a huge, lifeless stone array. As far as the eye could see, it gave Lin Yi the feeling that this should have been a rather grand and magnificent building complex. But for some reason, it was now in such a dilapidated state. Perhaps it was because too much time had passed, or perhaps it was destroyed by the aftermath of the ancient battle. Regardless, there was no doubt that this was the end of the 10,000-year Great Canyon. As for what lay beyond, they could only find out after passing through this huge stone array. Chapter 47:11. That's right, it's here. Huiyuti took out the map and looked at it carefully. She nodded at Lin Yi excitedly. Reaching this place meant that the Thunder Shin Vine wasn't far away. In her estimation, she thought it would take at least half a month to reach here. She didn't expect that they would arrive in 10 days. The journey could be said to be smooth sailing. This was all thanks to a strong teammate like Lin Yi. It seemed that she didn't find the wrong person. Lin Yi nodded and looked around for a while. He didn't find anyone here. This was within his expectations. After all, even if it was a master at the peak of the nascent soul stage, it wouldn't be easy to cross the 10,000-year Grand Canyon. Moreover, in just 5 days this kind of thing was basically a fantasy. What's next? Do we just go through it? Lin Yi turned around and asked. Of course not. There is an array here. Let me take a look. It should be nearby. Hui Yudi said as she looked at the map and began to search back and forth. Array? Linny heard this and frowned. He thought that this place was just a pile of broken walls. He didn't expect there to be an array. Could it be that these boulders in front of him were part of an array? In any case, since it was an array, it couldn't be touched. Linny could only stand aside and watch Hui Yudi search back and forth. However, after half a day, Hui Yudi's whole body was a little listless, and she still didn't find anything. Linny was speechless. That's right, Hui Yudi had been searching carefully. Every step she took seemed to be very careful. However, she had been going back and forth for so long. In fact, the route she took was basically the same. She walked back and forth in the same place. Even if she walked for 10,000 years, what could she do? What kind of hidden array could she find? Seeing that Hui Yudi repeated the route 37 times and was about to start the journey 38 times while panting, Linny couldn't stand it anymore. He stood up and stopped her. Are you tired? I'm not tired. Hui Yudi panted heavily as she spoke. You're not tired walking, but I'm tired just by looking at you. Linny shook his head speechlessly. He immediately said, Can't you show me the map? Why must you go around in circles by yourself? You and I are supposed to keep it a secret. No, absolutely not. Hui Yudi immediately blushed. In the beginning she was indeed on guard against Linny. That was human nature. However, since Linny risked his life to cure her poison and saved her life, she had long forgotten about this precaution. She immediately said angrily, I'm not keeping it a secret. You really can't walk around in this place. Oh. Linny raised his eyebrows. Didn't I tell you? There's an extremely profound formation here. If you walk around carelessly, even if it's just a single wrong step, it will trigger the heavenly lightning. That's very fatal. Hui Yudi said with a solemn expression. Heavenly lightning array? Could it be that some formation master specially set up a formation here? Linny couldn't help but be stunned. That's not it. It said that every place where the Thunder Shen vine grows will be protected by a naturally formed formation. If you want to pass through this heavenly lightning array, you absolutely can't force your way through. You must find the eye of the formation and attack the eye of the formation in a very special way to break the formation. Hui Yudi finished explaining and added faintly, So I'm doing this for your own good, lest you get struck by the heavenly lightning. Alright, but even so, you don't have to go around the same place. When will you be able to do this? Linny couldn't help but laugh. He paused and asked, Since you've meticulously collected so much information, don't you know the way to pass through this heavenly lightning array? The formation is naturally formed. Due to the changes in the environment every once in a while, the entire formation will change accordingly. No one can organize a route map. Even if they can, they don't dare to follow it. Because it's very likely to be useless, so if you want to pass through this heavenly lightning array safely, you can only rely on yourself to explore it. Of course, you can only start from the edge, Hui Yudi said helplessly. I'm going to faint. How long are you going to explore for? Just give it to me. Linny held his forehead. His time was very limited. If he wasted a few days on this kind of thing, he wouldn't know what to say. Oh. Hui Yudi responded weakly and immediately handed the map in her hand to Linny. Although she didn't think that Linny had any better ideas, she had probed for so long. She was really a little tired. Taking advantage of Lin Yi's shift to rest for a while wasn't a good idea. Lin Yi took the map from Hui Yudi and looked at it attentively. Other than the fact that there wasn't a clear way to break through the formation, everything else was clearly marked out. After looking at it for a while, Lin Yi walked in without another word. Hui Yudi was just about to sit down and rest. When she saw this scene, she immediately jumped up in shock and rushed over to grab Lin Yi's arm. She shouted, Hey! Do you want to die? Because of her panic, Hui Yudi almost hugged Lin Yi. Lin Yi felt that his entire arm was trapped in a certain gentle place. This kind of feeling was enough to intoxicate any man. Although Lin Yi wasn't such a pervert, he still subconsciously tightened his muscles. Looking at Lin Yi's strange gaze, Hui Yudi realized that the current position was too ambiguous. She screamed and quickly took a few steps back. Her cheeks instantly turned red to the roots of her ears. She didn't dare to look at Lin Yi anymore. Lin Yi smiled silently and immediately continued his previous pace. He just walked toward the Stonehenge, turning left and right from time to time. There was no specific pattern. It gave people the feeling that he was walking around as he pleased. However, the result was that he didn't trigger the Sky Thunder array from beginning to end. After Hui Yudi recovered from her shyness, she stared at the scene in front of her with her eyes wide open. Her face was full of disbelief. Could it be that she had guessed wrong? This place was not where the Thunder Shen Vine was, and there was no so-called Sky Thunder array at all? It was unlikely, right? This was the information that Master personally got from the West Island's island master, Ning Shangling. With their deep friendship they shouldn't fake this kind of thing. Or was there an error in this map? Hui Yudi didn't believe it. She immediately wanted to learn from Linny and walk around. As a result, as soon as she took a step before her feet completely landed, she heard a deafening crack in the air. A sharp dark blue lightning then struck down. Chapter 47:12. Fortunately, she hadn't completely landed on the ground yet. This bolt of lightning almost brushed past her calf and cut a long and narrow hole in her jeans. Fortunately, Hui Yudi herself wasn't grazed, which was a blessing in disguise. Otherwise, with the power displayed by this lightning, even if she did not die, she would be seriously injured. At worst, she would be knocked unconscious. Heavenly lightning was not a joke. This sudden movement not only shocked Hui Yudi, but also Lin Yi, who was walking in front of her. He quickly turned around and checked for her. Seeing that she was fine, he was relieved. He looked at her helplessly and said, "Don't you know that there is heavenly lightning here? Why are you walking around?" I just want to try." Hui Yudi replied weakly with a red face. Then she looked down at her pants that had been split open. Her face was filled with an indescribable heartache. These were clothes from the secular world. Perhaps this was the only set she would have in this lifetime. Looking at Hui Yudi's expression, Lin Yi was speechless. He seriously wondered if this girl had a screw loose in her brain. Her first reaction to something like this wasn't to be worried, but to be worried about her pants. Seeing Lin Yi speechlessly turn around and leave, Hui Yudi hurriedly called out, "Hey, wait for me." She was almost struck by lightning just now. It would be a lie to say that she was not scared at all. Although it was very unbelievable, Hui Yudi now believed that Lin Yi was not walking around randomly. He really had a way to avoid the hidden heavenly lightning array. Anyway, Lin Yi had given her all kinds of surprises in the past few days. She was already a little used to it. "Stay behind me, just don't wander around." Lin Yi turned back to look at her. But. Hui Yudi stammered, wanting to say something but hesitating. "But what? Is there other danger here?" Lin Yi was stunned. "Danger? No, I'm talking about my pants." Hui Yudi's face was red as she pointed at the hole in her pants. A small portion of her smooth and white calf was vaguely exposed, although not much was exposed. She had always been wearing clothes. This feeling was a little strange. "Oh, it's okay. This kind of beggar's pants are the most popular in the secular world. Many people buy jeans and deliberately tear them. People don't even want to look at your small size. At least a dozen of them." Lin Yi smiled. "Really?" Hui Yudi's eyes widened in disbelief. Why did he have to wear such tattered pants? How could there be such a person in this world? The secular world was really amazing. "Really? You can ask Han Jingjing yourself if you don't believe me. You should know that she came from the common world just like me, right?" Lin Yi asked. "Okay then." Hui Yudi nodded her head doubtfully. She knew about Han Jingjing. She wanted to get to know Han Jingjing well when she came to West Island this time. Unfortunately, Han Jingjing was either with Lin Yi or in the lab. She had no chance to see her at all, let alone talk to her. Seeing that Lin Yi was walking around in front of her, and it was as smooth as before, Hui Yudi quickly followed him. She was curious to see what was going on. However, she blindly followed him for a long time, but she couldn't find anything. Every turn was inexplicable. There was no pattern. "Hey, why do you walk this way?" Hui Yudi felt like a cat was scratching her heart. She couldn't help but ask. If it weren't for the lesson just now, she couldn't help but want to try it again. Intuition. Lin Yi's answer was concise and to the point. He really couldn't answer her question. Of course, he didn't know whether there was danger ahead, but he had the jade pendant. As long as there was danger ahead, there would be an early warning. When he found the direction where the warning completely disappeared, he would be foolproof. "Humph, stingy," Hui Yudi muttered. She still had a doubtful expression on her face. Of course, she didn't believe that all this was purely based on intuition. But in her knowledge, it seemed that only intuition could explain it. It could only be said that Lin Yi couldn't be treated with common sense. Following behind him was definitely the right choice. The two of them walked back and forth in the Stonehenge for a long time. Several times they broke into places where there were mines on three sides. Even Lin Yi, who had the jade pendant to warn him, couldn't do anything. He could only go back and explore bit by bit. Finally, he succeeded in bypassing them. According to the mark on the map, the Thunder Shen Vine was behind the Stonehenge. Lin Yi looked around. In front of him was a medium-sized open space. There were no boulders blocking the way, and it suddenly became clear. He took out the map and compared it with the map. He nodded and said, it should be here. Hui Yudi didn't say anything. She stared straight at the thing that looked like a memorial in the middle of the open space. She was a little lost in thought. To be honest, she was really a little absent-minded at this time. If it weren't for Lin Yi, a strong teammate, she wouldn't have been able to reach here with her own ability. At least it wouldn't have been so fast and easy. What's wrong? Lin Yi looked at her strangely and urged, hurry up and tell us what we should do next. Time is limited. Don't delay anymore. Although Hui Yudi hadn't said how to find the Thunder Xian Vine, Lin Yi could guess that it wasn't so easy to find something like the Thunder Xian Vine. Even if they reached the destination, they probably had to meet some extremely harsh and special conditions. Otherwise, it would be a little too easy to just have the Sky Thunder Matrix as an obstacle. The difficulty obviously didn't match the level of the Thunder Xian Vine. Hui Yudi was stunned for a moment before she reacted. She pointed to the memorial in front of her and said, "This is the 5 Thunder Retribution Memorial. It is the core of the entire Sky Thunder Matrix. Only by attacking the core can we temporarily break the Sky Thunder Matrix and have a chance to find the Thunder Xian Vine. After breaking the Matrix, it will be open for 5 days. After 5 days, the Sky Thunder Matrix will automatically reset, so we have to retreat before that." So simple? When Lin Yi heard this, he immediately mobilized his true chi to launch an attack. He was in a hurry now. He wouldn't hesitate for this kind of thing. In fact, hesitating was useless. Whether he could succeed or not, he would only know after trying. Wait. Hui Yudi was shocked. She quickly pulled him back and said, "I haven't finished speaking. Don't rush." "What else?" Lin Yi frowned. Chapter 47:13. Normal attacks won't work? Then what do we do? Lin Yi asked curiously, but when he said this, he had a faint guess. Could it be that this was the reason why Hui Yudi specifically asked him, a person with all 5 elements, to be a teammate? If you want to break the Sky Lightning Array, you have to use a very special method to attack the 5 Lightning Tribulation Archway. That is, you have to use martial skills of the 5 basic attributes at the same time. Furthermore, you have to make sure that the power of the 5 attribute martial skills is above the nascent soul stage. At Little Et, Hui Yudi explained. So it is like this. I was wondering why you had to find a stranger to be a teammate. So it was for this step. Lin Yi nodded, but then he said, "Then why didn't you find 5 people? It shouldn't be difficult to find nascent soul stage experts with 5 basic attributes in your school. Why do you have to find me? Are you stupid? 5 people have to be divided into 5 parts. How much do I have left?" Hui Yudi rolled her eyes at Lin Yi. Lin Yi couldn't help but look at her strangely and said, "Even if 5 people divided equally, you can still get 20%. You and I can only get 20% now. What's the difference? Don't tell me you forgot that we agreed on 20% to 80%. Hui Yudi choked and said angrily after a while, "Who knew you were so greedy? Also, my master specifically told me that the search for the Thunder Xian Vine must be kept secret. The fewer people, the better. Otherwise, the more people there are, the better. Otherwise, the more people there are, the more the news will be leaked. What's more troublesome is that if someone has ulterior motives during the process, it will be troublesome. Maybe they will turn against each other and kill each other. I don't want to end up in a tragedy. Even if I only get 20%, 2 people is better than 5. Hee, but now it's only the 2 of us. Aren't you afraid that I won't even give you the 20%? Lin Yi smiled mischievously. Hui Yudi wasn't afraid of him at all. She looked at him provocatively and said, "Whatever. Come on, isn't it just jamming before killing?" Lin Yi looked up at the sky, speechless. This girl wasn't this open at first, but after spending 10 days with her, now she was not afraid of him at all. Look at her proud expression when she said this, especially when she was wearing a denim sportswear with holes in it. She was like a delinquent girl in the secular world. A classical beauty had become like this. Wasn't the gap too big? At this moment, Lin Yi felt a sense of guilt. He felt that he was the main culprit. If she hadn't been following him these past few days, Hui Yudi would still be that ice mountain snow lotus classical beauty. At the very least, she definitely wouldn't be a delinquent in the secular world. Forget it. Let's get back to business. Let's hurry up and break the array. Lin Yi had no choice but to change the topic. He cast his gaze at the 5 Thunders Memorial Arch. However, this matter is actually a little difficult. Although you have all 5 elements, if you want to break the formation, you need to simultaneously execute all 5 elemental martial techniques in one breath. It's very difficult for ordinary people to do this, but I believe in you. Hui Yudi reminded him. If she hadn't seen Lin Yi's shocking strength before, she wouldn't have so much confidence in Lin Yi. After all, executing 5 elemental martial techniques at the same time was definitely not as easy as it sounded. Even if it wasn't at full strength, as long as it was at the nascent soul stage, it would be enough. However, all the actions had to be completed within one breath. This was basically equivalent to doing 5 things at once. For ordinary people, doing 2 things at once was not easy. Moreover, doing 5 things at once? When Lin Yi heard this, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. If it wasn't for the miraculous encounter when he came out of the 5 poison swamp, he really didn't know what to do after hearing Hui Yudi's words. Although he had learned the 5 elements 8 trigrams palm before, it also possessed the 5 elements at the same time. However, after this martial technique was upgraded to the full circle of heaven stage, it was capped. After that, there was no further advancement. It was still worlds apart from the nascent soul stage. As for the other martial techniques, no matter how skilled Lin Yi was in executing them, it was very difficult to execute them all in one breath. This girl didn't think clearly before looking for him. Was this something that an ordinary person could do? It was already not bad for an ordinary person to execute one martial technique in one breath. It was impossible for him to execute 2. However, it was also fortunate that Hui Yudi didn't think too much about this. Otherwise, the Thunder Shen Vine would probably have nothing to do with Lin Yi. Looking at Lin Yi's strange expression, Hui Yudi finally reacted. She knew that she had taken it for granted and could only think of a way to remedy the situation. She said, "This? I also know that it's not very realistic to execute 5 martial techniques at once. However, with your strength, you should be able to execute 4 martial techniques, right? I have metal-type spiritual roots, so I can coordinate with you to execute metal-type martial techniques. As for the other 4, I can only rely on you. Why don't we try it out first? If it's not possible, I have a wood-type spiritual root in my body. I should be able to practice it a little." "Forget it, it's not necessary." Lin Yi shook his head and directly blasted a 5 elements murderous chi at the 5 thunder tribulation archway in front of him. Hui Yudi was shocked when she saw this. It was too late to stop him. The 5 thunder tribulation archway was the core of the array. It didn't care whether you had practiced it before or not. There were only 2 results when attacking it. One was to successfully break the array, and the other was to attract crazy heavenly thunder. There was no third possibility. Hui Yudi was still thinking that this was a difficult task, but with Lin Yi's ability and her cooperation, they'd be able to form a tacit understanding after practicing a few dozen times. Only then would she give it a try. Who would have thought that Lin Yi would hit it so casually? Rumble. After the 5 elements murderous chi entered the 5 thunder tribulation archway, there was a sudden shaking of heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, the sky above was covered with dark clouds. Countless thunder and lightning were hidden in the clouds. It was a terrible scene of the end of the world. "Run." Hui Yudi was scared out of her wits. She quickly grabbed Lin Yi's hand and tried to run away. After all, the situation didn't look good. It was obvious that sky lightning was brewing, and it was probably the strongest sky lightning. Lin Yi's feet did not move, but looking at the terrible scene above his head, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Could it be that the 5 elements murderous chi couldn't be used to break the array? Previously, when he heard Hui Yudi's words, he thought that as long as the attack had the attributes of the 5 elements at the same time, it would be fine. As for whether it was 1 martial arts skill or 5 martial arts skills, it didn't matter. But if the 5 elements murderous chi couldn't be used, didn't it mean that 5 martial arts skills were needed? Run. Hui Yudi couldn't pull Lin Yi for a while and immediately became anxious. Fortunately, she was small. Otherwise, she would probably have carried Lin Yi and escaped. Chapter 47:14. Before she finished speaking, there was a loud crack above her head, and an extremely thick lightning pillar came crashing down. The terrifying might that was produced in that instant caused Hui Yudi's expression to change greatly. Not to mention a nascent soul stage expert, even a profound ascension stage expert would be struck to death. Today she was really going to die before she could even succeed. However, the next scene made her suddenly stunned. The target of this incomparably terrifying lightning pillar was not her and Lin Yi, but the 5 thunder retribution archway. Immediately afterward, in Hui Yudi's stunned gaze, this originally inconspicuous 5 thunder retribution archway was not smashed into pieces, but suddenly became dazzling, like a peerless treasure that had been baptized by the heavenly thunder, revealing a shocking lineup. Looks like it should be a success. Lin Yi's eyes lit up as he looked at the 5 thunder retribution archway that had changed shape. It was just an archway before, but at the moment, it was covered with all kinds of exquisite and profound runes, and on the edge, there was a circle of light that was neither big nor small, rippling in a very regular pattern. This kind of circle of light felt familiar, a bit like a teleportation array. This seems to have really broken the array, but how is this possible? Woyuti looked at this scene and was dumbfounded. She roughly knew what would happen after breaking the array, and the description in the intelligence was almost the same as what was in front of her, but she still turned her head to look at Lin Yi in disbelief and said, "You can really use 5 kinds of martial arts techniques at the same time? And my martial arts technique is a bit special." Lin Yi explained vaguely and then said, "Let's go." "Oh, it seems that I really found the right person." Woyuti rejoiced. If Lin Yi didn't have this trick up his sleeve, this would be a lot of trouble. Maybe they wouldn't even be able to enter the door in the end. But now, everything was solved. According to the information she received, as long as they could break this sky thunder formation, they would be able to escape. After that, there were no more obstacles. Without hesitation, the two of them immediately walked to the aperture at the edge of the 5 Thunder Retribution archway. As expected, this aperture was a small teleportation array. However, it was different from the teleportation arrays that they had seen before. The other teleportation arrays required a certain amount of time to activate, but this one was different. As soon as Lin Yi and Woyuti walked into the aperture, the scene in front of them immediately changed. Rather than saying it was a teleportation, it was more like pushing open Doraemon's door of anything. Pushing open the door would bring one to another place. The scene unfolding in front of the two of them. It was a narrow one-way passage. Above them was a single line of sky. Thunderclouds covered the sky, causing people to feel intimidated. At first, Lin Yi wanted to go up and explore, but when he saw the thick thunderclouds, he immediately gave up on the idea. If he went up rashly, he would definitely be struck to death by lightning. On the other hand, Woyuti heaved a sigh of relief. Although that was what the intelligence had said, she was still afraid that an unexpected crisis would occur at this time. However, from the looks of it, there was no danger for the time being. "Let's go." As Lin Yi spoke, he took the lead and walked forward. There was only a one-way passage in front of them. There was no other choice. Anyway, he had the jade pendant as an early warning. Even if there was danger, he could react in advance. After turning 3 corners, Lin Yi suddenly stopped in his tracks. Woyuti, who was behind, was caught off guard and bumped into him. She asked, "What's wrong?" "There's no way out." Lin Yi's voice at the moment had some inexplicable excitement. "There's no way out?" Woyuti was stunned. Her head popped out from behind Lin Yi's back. Then she was also stunned. Her eyes flashed with incomparable excitement. She murmured excitedly, "Thunder Shen Vine. This is the Thunder Shen Vine." There was indeed no way out in front of the two of them. There was only an extremely steep cliff. However, on this cliff there were a few strangely shaped vines. Apart from being thicker than ordinary vines, the most distinctive feature was the electric arcs that flashed on its surface from time to time. Without a doubt, this was the Thunder Shen Vine. After a slight count, Lin Yi's eyes lit up. There was actually a total of 5 Thunder Shen vines in this place. However, 2 of them had been chopped off at some point, leaving only 2 sections of roots of different lengths. As for the remaining 3 Thunder Shen vines, their growth was different. One of them was already very mature. Not only was the vine much thicker than the others, even the electric arcs that flashed on it from time to time were stronger and more frequent. As for the remaining 2 Thunder Shen vines, they were relatively more tender. One of them was already showing signs of maturing, while the other had just bloomed. Even the vine had not officially spread out yet. It turns out that there are 5 Thunder Mystic Rattans alternating with each other. Lin Yi immediately understood. From the looks of it, these 5 Thunder Shen vines' growth cycles were staggered. In other words, it was basically guaranteed that 1 Thunder Shen vine would mature in every trial. It seemed that these Thunder Shen Rattans were not natural and wild, but had been carefully arranged by someone. As for the purpose, it was mostly to ensure the value of the West Island trial. After all, the Thunder Shen Rattan was a treasure of heaven and earth. If there was a break in the supply, the West Island trial would not be as famous as it was now on the 5 Heaven Stage Islands. "It's this one, quickly chop it down." Woyuti pointed at the fully matured Thunder Shen vine and said excitedly, eager to give it a try. "Chop it off." Lin Yi couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard this. He asked curiously, "Why do we have to chop it off? Isn't it good to take it back with the roots? I can take it back and plant it, right? Don't you know the customary rules of the cultivation world?" Woyuti glanced at Lin Yi. Seeing that he really didn't know what was going on, she explained, "Always leave a way out, especially in the face of heaven and earth treasures. If there are no special circumstances, you must never cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. After all, it is your fate that you encountered it, but you can't deprive other cultivators of the good fortune that nature has given. You must know that if you do too much, your fate will inevitably end early. Oh, I've learned. Lin Yi nodded humbly. He really didn't expect that there would be such a customary rule on the Heaven Stage Island. It seemed that in addition to mutual deception in the cultivation world, it was not necessarily that there were no rules. Greed was human nature. If there were no such rules, the heaven and earth treasures on the Heaven Stage Island would have been dug clean, leaving nothing behind. Leaving a way out for others was equivalent to leaving a way out for oneself. However, since this rule was customary, it meant that it was not mandatory. Except for disciples like Hoi Yudi who came from East Continent College or famous sects who had this kind of self-awareness, others might not be so obedient. Chapter 47:15. Especially in a chaotic place like the South Sea, there would never be such a well-behaved cultivator. At least, Lin Yi had never seen such a cultivator. Not only that, in fact, it's useless even if you dig it back. It can't grow at all, Hoi Yudi continued. Why? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask. Because the Thunder Xian Rattan has very unique and harsh requirements for its growth environment. It must be tempered by thunder and lightning to grow continuously. Except for the unique environment in this place, where it can often be tempered by thunder and lightning, no other place has such conditions, Hoi Yudi said with a smile. Well, that's a problem. Lin Yi nodded. In fact, this could be seen from the name of the Thunder Xian Rattan and the electric arcs on its vines. There were thick thunderclouds above their heads, and it couldn't be found in other places. He had planned to put the Thunder Xian Rattan into the space of the jade pendant, but after thinking about it he decided to give up. It was not purely because the Thunder Xian Rattan needed thunder and lightning. Lin Yi could barely meet this condition. He now had the thunder attribute, and it was not difficult to create a little thunder and lightning in the space of the jade pendant from time to time. The key was that this was West Island, which was the territory of Ning Xuefei's family. Lin Yi could cheat anyone but Ning Xuefei. Anyway, he could get a lot of Thunder Xian Rattan this time, and it didn't matter if it was not rooted or not. The two immediately began to cut the Thunder Xian Rattan excitedly. Because of the flashing electric arcs on it, it was actually a technical job. If they were not careful, they would get hurt. But Hoi Yudi had already prepared for it. She brought special tools in her backpack and they could finally come in handy at this time. While Lin Yi and Hoi Yudi were cutting the Thunder Xian Rattan, two familiar old faces suddenly appeared in the Stonehenge outside. They were Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming. In this West Island trial, their task was not only to destroy Lin Yi's plan, but also to have a very important task, which was the Thunder Xian Rattan. They also had the intelligence information that Hoi Yudi had. So it was not surprising that they appeared here, but they didn't have Lin Yi's jade pendant to warn them. It wasn't easy to pass through the stone array. Although the sky lightning array had been destroyed by Lin Yi in name, he had only opened up the passageway inside. The sky lightning array on the outside was still operating. One wrong step and there would be a crack of lightning. However, the two of them had come prepared. At this point they were not helpless. At this moment, Kong Mingming was wearing an awe-inspiring AI armor. He was holding something that looked like a detector in his hand, and it seemed to be connected to the intelligent armor. With this thing, Kong Mingming was able to miraculously dodge the lightning. Needless to say, the technological level of the center was not to be underestimated. The practicality of this kind of high-tech gadget was almost as good as Lin Yi's jade pendant warning. There would always be a corresponding sign before lightning strikes. Even the heavenly lightning array here was no exception. Therefore he had to rely on the detector in his hand. That was why Kong Mingming was able to detect the heavenly thunder in advance. However, this alone was not enough for him to avoid the heavenly thunder. This was because although the detector was extremely sensitive, it could only predict the lightning by half a second. The reaction time was far less than Lin Yi's jade pendant warning. However, the AI armor on Kong Mingming made up for this shortcoming. This high-tech crystal was connected to the detector, and it could even automatically dodge. In other words, before Kong Mingming could react, it had already automatically dodged. From a certain point of view, this gadget's technological content was much higher than the powerful laser cannon. Haha, young Master Su, what do you think? The things in the secular world are still very powerful, right? This thing is much more powerful than any divine weapon. Kong Mingming laughed proudly as he led the way. Not bad indeed. Su Lingchong nodded sincerely. Along the way, Kong Mingming's various performances had completely changed his view of the secular world. At least these high-tech gadgets in the secular world were indeed powerful. Looking at Kong Mingming's swagger, Su Lingchong was even a little envious. He wanted to grab it and wear it himself. The two of them arrived at the Five Thunders archway very quickly. Kang Ming looked at the glowing archway in front of him and rubbed his eyes. He said in amazement, "The place that produces the Thunder Mystic Rattan is really powerful. Even the array is so cool. Young Master Su, it seems that we can only use some strength to break the door, right?" "That's right. The intelligence said that we need to concentrate all 5 elements to attack at the same time. We can't do it with just the 2 of us. However, can you break the door by force?" Su Lingchong asked doubtfully. "I don't know. Let's give it a try first. Anyway, the higher-ups told us to do it. They can't blame us if anything goes wrong." Kang Ming rubbed his hands as he spoke. He immediately set up the laser cannon and aimed at the Five Thunders archway. No matter what kind of bullshit request it had, it would be destroyed with a blast. Kang Ming licked his lips eagerly. However, when he was about to fire, Su Lingchong suddenly stopped him. "Wait a minute. This archway is a little strange. Why do I feel that it has been opened by someone?" "Ah? Really?" Kang Ming was surprised. He was just showing off with the help of the super high-tech equipment. In terms of eyesight, he was far worse than Su Lingchong. "It should be right. Go and have a try." Su Lingchong immediately ordered. In the past, Kang Ming would definitely find a way to shirk the responsibility of such a guinea pig mission. However, he was so confident now that he strode over without saying anything. As soon as he walked into the circle of light of the Five Thunders archway, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. Sure enough, Su Lingchong hurriedly followed him. Although Kang Ming was the main force of this mission, he would not let Kang Ming have the upper hand when it came to the Thunder Xian Rattan. The sudden intrusion of Kang Ming and Su Lingchong immediately alerted Lin Yi. His divine sense had been carefully perceiving all the movements in the surroundings. He could not detect them when they were outside, but once they entered the archway, it was impossible for them to escape his perception. "Someone is coming. Wait for my signal," Lin Yi hurriedly reminded Huiyudi. Then he quickly put the Thunder Xian Rattan into the space of the Jade Pendant. Chapter 47:16. As soon as Lin Yi put away the Thunder Xian Rattan, Kang Ming and Su Lingchong rushed in the next moment. Both sides couldn't help but be a little stunned for a moment. They subconsciously took 2 steps back and confronted each other. We are really enemies on a narrow road. I was wondering who was so insensible and dared to get here first. It turns out to be you, the pretentious leader." Kang Ming reacted and immediately jumped. At the same time, he couldn't help but aim the laser cannon at Lin Yi. He couldn't wait to find a chance to shoot this guy. Not only Kang Ming and Su Lingchong were shocked, but in fact, Lin Yi and Huiyudi were even more shocked than them at the moment. Although they were aware of it in advance, Lin Yi's shock at the moment was not faked. He really didn't expect these 2 guys to come here. Glancing at the laser cannon in Kang Ming's hand without a trace, Lin Yi had quietly prepared to make a move. With the strength of the 2 opponents, there was no threat to them, but this laser cannon could easily kill a nascent soul stage expert, so they had to be on guard. In particular, the other party also occupied the position of the exit. Once they fought, the 2 of them were in a very disadvantageous position. It was simply like a turtle in a jar. If they wanted to make a move, they must make the first move. At the same time, Huiyudi was also secretly holding her breath. It was basically impossible to be kind when encountering the 2 of them at this time. Although she was a woman, if they really wanted to fight, she, Huiyudi, would definitely be the one to make the first move. Compared to Kang Ming, who wanted to take the opportunity to find trouble with Lin Yi, Su Lingchong's focus was on the Thunder Xian Rattan. After glancing at the situation on the cliff, he couldn't help but frown and said, "Hey? Why are these Thunder Xian Rattan not too mature yet? Could it be that the mature ones have been cut off by you? Are you blind? If you cut it off, then find it and see. Did you eat it? The 2 of us have just arrived here," Lin Yi said in an unfriendly tone. Su Lingchong and Kang Ming looked at each other and confirmed that Lin Yi and Huiyudi didn't have any Thunder Xian Rattan on their bodies. After all, if this thing was really chopped off, its volume wouldn't be small. He definitely couldn't hide it on his body. "Are the 2 of you also here for the Thunder Xian Rattan?" Su Lingchong asked again. "Nonsense. If you don't come here for the Thunder Xian Rattan, do you think you're here for the scenery?" There was an obvious smell of gunpowder in Lin Yi's tone, giving people the feeling that he had suffered a setback and was sulking. He coldly snorted and said, "We went through so much trouble to come here, but who knew that it was not ripe yet? We came here for nothing and can only go back empty-handed. What bad luck." As he spoke, he gave Huiyudi a look. Lin Yi took the lead and walked out with an unfriendly expression. Su Lingchong and Kang Ming didn't stop them. Anyway, the other party didn't get the Thunder Shen Ratan, so it didn't matter to let them go. They tactfully made way for them. Huiyudi anxiously followed Lin Yi's footsteps. As a result, they passed smoothly. She couldn't help but admire Lin Yi's calmness and resourcefulness. He obviously had a whole Thunder Shen Ratan, but he could still deceive the other party. His acting was really superb. He let Lin Yi and Huiyudi pass. Kang Mingming originally wanted to take the opportunity to find trouble, but since Lin Yi was so sensible and took the initiative to give way, and the higher-ups said that they couldn't take the initiative to provoke the other party, he simply couldn't be bothered. He turned to Su Lingchong and said, "Young Master Su, since that's the case, let's go dig it ourselves. Don't bother with this pretentious leader. These two Thunder Shen Ratans haven't matured yet. It's useless to take them back." Su Lingchong frowned and shook his head. "That's true." Kang Mingming thought for a moment. Then he suggested, "Why don't we uproot them and take them back? Anyway, it's the higher-ups' order. Let them solve this matter by themselves. We've done our best." Uproot them? That's not good, is it? Su Lingchong couldn't help but hesitate. Although he wasn't a good person by nature, he was, after all, a disciple cultivated by the 3 pavilions of the North Island. The imperceptible influence of the famous sects influenced his behavior. At least, he knew the unspoken rule of leaving a way out for everything. But we can't go back empty-handed like this pretentious leader, can we? Although these 2 thunder mystic vines haven't matured yet, we're doing our duty by cutting them down and bringing them back. The higher-ups won't be able to say anything. If we leave like this and the higher-ups blame us, we won't be able to handle it, Kang Xiaoming advised. At the thought of being punished by the mysterious man, Su Lingchong couldn't help but shiver. He had to nod and agree, "Well, let's do as you say." After that, they were ready to dig up the 2 immature Thunder Shen Ratans. Lin Yi was about to reach the exit. After noticing their movement, he was shocked. If it was something else, he really didn't want to get involved. But this involved the interests of the whole West Island, especially Ning Xuefei's interests. He couldn't just stand by. If it weren't for this consideration, Lin Yi would have transplanted all these Thunder Shen Ratans into the space of his jade pendant. How could Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming have a chance? Stop. Lin Yi suddenly appeared behind them, which really startled Su Lingchong and Kang Mingming. They didn't expect that this guy would come back. Su Lingchong suddenly acted as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Although he was a master of the gathering vitality stage now, he had suffered too many losses from Lin Yi before, so he was a little scared from the bottom of his heart. If he faced Lin Yi alone, his first reaction would definitely be to turn around and run away. But this time it was different. He had Kang Mingming with a full suit of high-tech equipment, whose combat capability was comparable to that of a master of the mysterious ascending stage. Naturally, he wouldn't be scared by Lin Yi. What? Pretentious leader, you won't tell me that you regret now and want to get a share of the profits, will you? Let me tell you, no way. Kang Mingming said arrogantly. At the same time, he pointed at Lin Yi with the laser cannon, his face full of disdain. Su Lingchong stepped back with fear on his face. Kang Mingming was a ready-made human shield, and he wasn't afraid of Lin Yi's surprise attack at all. But Su Lingchong couldn't do that. If they really fought, he might be easily killed in a second, which would be a great injustice. You don't even let go of the immature Thunder Shen Ratans and you want to dig up the roots. Anyway, you are the disciples of the 3 pavilions of the North Island. You have no bottom line. Huiyudi, who appeared behind Lin Yi, looked at the 2 angrily. Chapter 47:17. Humph, the North Island and the West Island have always been on good terms. You 2 treat the treasure of heaven and earth of the West Island like this. If the news gets out, how do you think the leaders of the North Island will deal with you? Maybe it will directly alarm Pavilion Master Shangguan. Are you sure you can withstand it with your Ultraman equipment? Lin Yi sneered. Sent, Kang Xiaoming and Su Lingchong's expressions changed when they heard that. Although the other party's words were frightening, it wasn't impossible. If they were to accuse them of deliberately destroying the relationship between the 2 islands, then they wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Although Kang Mingming's super high-tech equipment was awesome and unscrupulous, he did not dare to face the anger of a super big shot like Shanghai Tianhua. Kang Mingming was speechless for a moment, but Su Lingchong, who was hiding behind him, said, "Are you kidding? The treasure of heaven and earth belongs to those who are capable. Since we are allowed to participate in the trial of the West Island this time, as long as we have the ability, the Thunder Shen Ratan will naturally be at our disposal. The rules of the trial didn't say that we can't dig the Thunder Shen Ratan, right? Yes, since the rules of the trial didn't say it, it means that it is tacitly allowed and no one can find fault with it." Kang Ming Ming quickly echoed and sneered at Lin Yi and Su Lingchong. You are stupid, but you blame others. You are also acting righteously. Tut tut, the pretentious leader is really the pretentious leader. You are really twisting words and forcing logic. How could the 3 pavilions of the North Island cultivate such rogue disciples like you? You have done this kind of thing and you are still proud. You are so shameless. Hui Yudi said angrily. Hee, when we get the Thunder Shen Ratan, I will be the winner of this trial. When I marry the princess of the West Island, you will know whether I am shameless or not. Kang Ming Ming laughed. Now he somewhat looked down on Hui Yudi. The Thunder Shen Ratan, a rare treasure of heaven and earth, was in his hands. Even if others tried their best to grab a basket of treasures of heaven and earth, it would be useless. Its value was far less than a small piece here. In other words, Princess Ning Xuefei of the West Island was already in his pocket, just like the Thunder Shen Ratan. Don't worry. You won't be able to get the Thunder Profound Ratan. Lin Yi's expression turned cold. Before he finished his words, he raised his hand and released a murderous aura of the 5 elements. Previously, he was not ready to fight to the death with Kang Ming Ming, who was fully equipped with high-tech equipment, so it was okay for him to take a step back. But now that Kang Ming Ming had made it clear that he wanted to lay his hands on Ning Xuefei, he had touched his reverse scale, and he had to kill him. Seeing that Lin Yi had suddenly launched an attack and hearing the vague yet breathtaking dragon roar, Kang Ming Ming's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Although he wasn't afraid of Lin Yi now, the power he had accumulated for a long time was already deeply ingrained in his heart. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't flustered at all. As for Su Lingchong, he was terrified to the point that he simply hid behind Kang Ming Ming. The lesson of Ma Daoqiang, the intermediate stage nascent soul realm cultivator, was still vivid in his mind. Even if his true strength was slightly stronger than Ma Daoqiang, it was still limited, and he knew that he was absolutely not a match for a freak like Lin Yi. Boom. In the blink of an eye, the 5 elements murderous chi had already blasted onto Kang Ming Ming's chest, and the aftermath that escaped caused the surrounding area to shake. It could be seen how powerful it was. Hui Yudi was overjoyed seeing this. She didn't have a good impression of a hateful guy like Kang Ming Ming, especially when he did things without a bottom line. She simply hated him to the extreme and couldn't wait for Lin Yi to kill him. From now on, there would be one less bastard in the world. However, in the next moment, Hui Yudi's eyes suddenly widened. She had already seen this move of Lin Yi's 5 elements murderous chi several times on the road, especially the scene where he casually slapped Scarface away. It left a deep impression on her. After all, Scarface was a profound ascending stage expert. Using such a powerful killing move to deal with Kang Ming Ming, Hui Yudi originally thought that it would be a piece of cake. However, she didn't expect that after Lin Yi's 5 elements murderous chi hit him head-on, Kang Ming Ming only snorted and took half a step back. That was all. Not to mention Hui Yudi, even Lin Yi himself couldn't help but be shocked by this result. The 5 elements murderous chi was his current strongest killing move. It was a powerful trump card that could instantly kill a profound ascending stage expert, but Kang Ming Ming was hit head-on in the chest, and there was no damage at all. How was this possible? Haha, pretentious boss, you're only SOSO. Kang Ming Ming was a little panicked at first, but now he suddenly became arrogant. I'm not afraid to tell you, this is the latest super high-tech intelligent armor that I developed. Even a full blow from a profound ascending stage expert can be easily defended. You're just a mere peak early nascent soul stage expert. When Lin Yi heard this, he couldn't help but frown. He had already overestimated Kang Ming Ming's equipment, or else he wouldn't have chosen to take the initiative to retreat in the beginning. However, he thought that the thing he should be most afraid of was the laser cannon, but he didn't expect the opponent's intelligent armor to be even more difficult to deal with. Even the strongest 5 elements murderous chi couldn't be used. Didn't this mean that the opponent was in an invincible position? Since he couldn't hit the body, he could only hit the head. At least the head was not protected by the armor. Lin Yi didn't hesitate to attack again. However, before he could condense the 5 elements murderous chi again, the intelligent armor on Kang Ming Ming's body suddenly moved, and actually covered his head tightly. This time there was no blind spot and he had completely become Ultraman. For a moment Lin Yi was a little helpless. In this situation, if he didn't find a way to break this intelligent armor, he couldn't fight at all. But if he just retreated like this, then the 2 Thunder Shenratans would definitely fall into the hands of the opponent. It would not only cause a huge loss to West Island, but the key was that it was related to Ning Xuefei's marriage. Lin Yi couldn't let a bastard like Kang Ming Ming have the last laugh, could he? Although he had a mature Thunder Shenratan, if Kang Ming Ming dug out 2 of them, the value would be more than his. Haha, now you have no choice, right? I haven't done anything yet. Come on, I'll let you, the pretentious leader, taste the power of my laser cannon. Kang Ming Ming laughed and immediately set up the laser cannon. Before his voice died away, he directly shot the laser cannon at Lin Yi. Under normal circumstances, this kind of instantaneous weapon couldn't be dodged at all. It would definitely hit where it was pointed, and there was almost no time difference in between. No matter how strong and fast one was, it was nonsense. Could it be faster than the speed of light? Fortunately, Lin Yi had the warning of the jade pendant, and he made a dodging movement in advance before Kang Ming Ming made his move, so he could barely escape. The laser cannon missed the target, and the laser cannon actually blasted a bottomless pit on the cliff here. Its power was so amazing that it was appalling. Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little frightened. Even the full blow of a master at the full completion of Mysterious Ascension couldn't be so fucking terrifying. Chapter 47:18. However, it was clear that this kid did not intend to let Lin Yi go so easily. Kang Ming Ming immediately followed up with another shot. Usually he could not take the initiative to provoke Lin Yi, but this time, Lin Yi made the first move. Kang Ming 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 had no qualms about fighting back. How could he let go of such an opportunity so easily? Lin Yi saw that the situation was not good. He quickly retreated with Hui Yudi and temporarily escaped from the opponent's line of sight by using the cliff as a cover. This was the only way. The super high-tech equipment of the smart armor and the laser cannon was too fierce. Even if his strength was 100 times higher than Kang Ming Ming's, he could not do anything to the opponent for a while. If Lin Yi was alone, it would be fine. With the warning of the jade pendant, he could at least deal with the opponent head-on. He might have a chance to find the opponent's weakness. However, he had to consider Hui Yudi's safety now. Even if Kang Ming Ming did not deliberately target her, it was very easy for him to accidentally hurt her. The laser cannon was something that could kill a person. After a few turns, Lin Yi and Hui Yudi had already escaped to the exit. Seeing that Kang Ming Ming did not chase after them, they stopped and looked at each other. What should we do? Are we just going to let them dig up the Thunder Mystic Vine? Hui Yudi looked at Lin Yi in shock. The scene just now had made her understand the horror of the opponent's equipment. Even Lin Yi could not do anything to the opponent, let alone her. Basically, even if Kang Ming Ming stood in front of her and let her hit him, she would not be able to do anything. Lin Yi shook his head unwillingly, but he could not think of a solution at the moment. He believed that even the super high-tech equipment must have a weakness. But how could he find this weakness? That was an undeniable problem. At this moment, Lin Yi suddenly felt his heart tighten. The warning of the jade pendant in his mind was ringing wildly. Without saying anything, he quickly pushed Hui Yudi to the ground. Ah! Hui Yudi let out a cry of surprise. Her face was completely red as she looked at Lin Yi, who was pressing down on her. She could feel his manly aura so close to her, and her face was so red that it seemed as if it was about to drip blood. She couldn't help but say angrily, "What are you doing? Do you want to kill him first?" Oh. Lin Yi was originally quite nervous, but when he heard her words he immediately burst into laughter. How did this girl's brain work? Even at this time she could think of killing him first? Lin Yi didn't say anything but silently pointed upwards. Hui Yudi looked in the direction of his finger and was instantly shocked. There was a huge hole in the place where they had just been standing. It was obvious that Kang Ming Ming hadn't given up and had blindly fired in the direction of the exit. The power of this laser cannon was terrifying. It directly pierced through the 4 cliffs in the middle of the road. If it weren't for Lin Yi's timely rescue, both of them would have been dead by now. Perhaps they would have already gone to the Yellow Springs together. Let's get out of here first. Lin Yi pulled Hui Yudi up and looked at Kang Ming Ming, who was inside the big hole, from afar. He immediately flashed out of the 5 Thunder Tribulation archway. It was too dangerous to continue staying inside. This laser cannon was simply unreasonable. Ah! The pretentious old man has become a coward. This time I must let you suffer. Kang Ming Ming laughed complacently. Seeing Lin Yi and Hui Yuhao fleeing in panic, he immediately set off to chase and kill them. He didn't intend to let Lin Yi go so easily. Even if he couldn't kill him, he had to make a hole in Lin Yi's body to collect some interest. Forget it. Business is more important. Let's dig out the Thunder Shen Vine first. Su Lingchong tried to stop him. Although he also hated Lin Yi to the core, he still remembered the mysterious man's warning. If Kang Ming Ming really killed Lin Yi with one shot, Su Lingchong would be afraid. If the higher-ups blamed him, it would be impossible for him to stay out of it. He did not want to complicate matters. All right then, I'll let that pretentious old man go for now. I'll deal with him after we get out of here. Kong Ming Ming reluctantly put away the laser cannon and began to dig out the Thunder Shen vine with his eyes shining. As long as he got these 2 Thunder Shen vines, he not only completed the task assigned by the higher-ups, but also could get Ning Xuefei, the Princess of West Island, into his pocket at the same time. This kind of beautiful thing, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, would only appear in a dream. Inside, the 2 people were digging the Thunder Shen vine in full swing. Outside, Lin Yi and Hui Yudi were looking at the 5 Thunder Tribulation archway in front of them and were at a loss of what to do. Not to mention Hui Yudi, Lin Yi was definitely not willing to retreat like this. But he could do nothing about Kong Ming Ming's super high-tech equipment. It was really a dilemma. You stay outside and find a place to hide first. I'll go in and try again. Lin Yi thought for a while and said. But he could still deal with the other party for a while by himself. No matter what, even if it was for Ning Xuefei, he could not retreat like this. Are you sure? Hui Yudi quickly pulled him and asked. To be honest, I'm really not sure, but I have to try anyway. If I don't try, I'll never find a way. If I try, I may have a chance. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Well, if you want to go, I'll go with you. Hui Yudi said with a firm look. Why do you want to go with me? Lin Yi could not help but be stunned. Then he seemed to think of something. He took out a piece of Thunder Shen vine from the space of the jade pendant and handed it to her. Although it was a rough estimate, it was at least a lot more than the 20% that was previously agreed. What are you doing? Hui Yudi was also stunned. You came here for the Thunder Shen vine. Now that your purpose has been achieved, you don't have to continue to follow me and take risks. Lin Yi looked at her and said. If they went in again, it would be inevitable to fight hard. It was okay for him, but for Hui Yudi, it was a dangerous situation. He did not want this little girl to be implicated because of him. Aren't you also going for the Thunder Shen vine? Then why do you want to go back and take risks? Hui Yudi pouted. I'm going back for Ning Xuefei. Don't tell me you also want to fight for Ning Xuefei. You are a woman? Lin Yi heard her words and laughed. I don't care. If I want to leave this place, I can leave. If I want to stay, I can stay. If you want to go in, I want to go in too. Hui Yudi stubbornly said. Lin Yi suddenly felt a headache when he heard this. Ever since this little girl put on the denim suit, she was more and more developing into a delinquent girl in the secular world. Even the tone and manner of speaking were the same. How could this be endured? Seeing that Hui Yudi refused to let him go in alone, Lin Yi felt helpless and could not help but feel a little touched. After getting along for 10 days, the 2 of them could be regarded as real friends. Otherwise, if it was just a simple union of interests, they would have parted ways long ago. Why would she insist on staying to accompany him? After all, this was risking her life. Chapter 47:19. In order to deal with Kong Ming Ming's super high-tech equipment, Han Jingjing specially gave him a mobile phone before he set off. Just now, he was in a hurry and forgot about it. Ignoring Hui Yudi's surprised gaze, Lin Yi immediately took out the mobile phone. As soon as he turned it on, he found that this place was a little better than expected. Although the signal was very weak, he could still receive a little bit. It could be seen that this place should not be too far from the mainland of West Island. Otherwise, the small base station set up by Han Jingjing could not reach it at all. There was only one number saved on the mobile phone. Without thinking, he knew that it must be Ning Xuefei's. Looking at the 5 major Heaven Stage islands, only she and Han Jingjing could use mobile phones to make calls. Brother Lin Yi. Han Jingjing's excited voice soon came from the other end of the phone. Obviously, Ning Xuefei's mobile phone had been temporarily taken care of by her in order to provide off-site support to Lin Yi at any time. She had been carrying it with her for so many days, waiting for this moment. Jingjing, I'm in a little trouble now. Help me think of a way to solve it. Lin Yi had no time for small talk and said directly, I'm fighting with Kong Ming Ming, but his armor is like a tortoise shell. Even if I use my strongest martial arts to attack, it is useless. Even his head is covered tightly. It seems that there is no blind spot. Well, Han Jingjing could not help but fall into deep thought. After a while she said, it's really difficult to deal with it. If only I were here, maybe I could find a solution. But it can't be done in a short time. Since the defense of his armor is so strong, I'm afraid that normal attack methods are not realistic unless what? Lin Yi asked quickly. Use electric shock. Han Jingjing's voice was loud. Electric shock? Why didn't I think of it? Lin Yi was stunned at first and then his eyes lit up. To deal with Kong Ming Ming's metal armor, which was like a tortoise shell, electric shock was definitely the most effective and fatal method. No matter how strong his defense was, it would be useless. Once the electricity was activated, he would be able to ignore it. Not only would this metal armor not be able to save Kong Ming Ming, but it would also be the talisman that would hasten his death. Coincidentally, a few days ago, even if Lin Yi wanted to use electric shock on Kang Ming, it would have been impossible. That was because he didn't have any means of electrocution. However, things were different now. He had mastered the power of lightning from the inheritance of the giant electric eel. Even though its power was far inferior to the 5 elements killing aura, it was more than enough to deal with Kang Ming. Lin Yi was so excited that he was about to hang up when Han Jingjing spoke up. "Lin Yi bro, don't get too excited just yet. The electrocution was just a possible countermeasure. Let's not talk about whether or not it'll work, but I doubt that a high-tech armor like his wouldn't be able to do that. Maybe it's not afraid of electric shock at all." "How is that possible?" Lin Yi was shocked. "After all, this loophole is too obvious. If I were the designer of this armor, I would definitely think of a way to solve this problem. Even if I can't make it completely immune to electric shock, I would at least try to make up for this weakness. I dare say that this armor has an insulating layer. Normal electric shock is definitely useless," Han Jingjing said with certainty. "Then what should we do? Doesn't that mean we're really helpless?" Lin Yi felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. His little bit of excitement was instantly extinguished. Han Jingjing was an expert in this area. Since she dared to come to such a conclusion, it meant that it couldn't be wrong. Thinking about it carefully, whether it was the AI armor or the laser cannon, they were both high-tech products that could almost represent the highest level of technology in the mortal world. If there was such an obvious loophole in these things, it would be child's play. Han Jingjing thought for a moment and said, "Because I can't get first-hand information, I can't think of any other way. For the time being, it seems that electric shock is the most effective way to deal with it. However, it can't be a simple electric shock. We have to do some preparatory work first." "What preparatory work?" Lin Yi asked hurriedly. And so. Han Jingjing explained it over the phone and Lin Yi calmed down. He couldn't wait to hang up the phone and get ready to test it on Kang Ming. "What is this thing? Is it a technological product from the mortal world?" Seeing that Lin Yi seemed to be prepared, Yudi asked. She saw that Lin Yi was talking to this thing. She saw that there was a vague female voice coming from it. It sounded like it was Han Jingjing. This was too magical. At this moment, her eyes were filled with little stars of curiosity. Her heart felt like it was being scratched by hundreds of claws. She couldn't wait to snatch it and study it. "Oh, this is a mobile phone, a very common communication tool in the mortal world. You can study it later when you are free." Lin Yi threw the mobile phone to Yudi. After taking a deep breath, he carefully re-entered the light circle of the 5 Thunder Tribulation Archway. Seeing that Lin Yi went in, Yudi naturally didn't want to be left behind. She immediately put the mobile phone and the Thunder Shen Vine that Lin Yi gave her into her backpack and followed him in tiptoeing. The scene in front of them changed. Lin Yi and Yudi reappeared in the narrow passage one after another. Standing at the exit, they could see the situation inside from afar. At this time, Kang Ming and Su Lingchong were digging the Thunder Shen Vine in full swing. Each of them had one Thunder Shen Vine and they were very happy. Lin Yi made a shushing gesture to Yudi, and then his figure flashed. In order to gain the upper hand before the other party noticed and reacted, he didn't hesitate to use the extreme butterfly micro-steps. His whole person was like a ghost, approaching the two of them at the fastest speed. Yudi looked at this scene nervously, and her heart was in her throat. She didn't know what method Han Jingjing and Lin Yi had discussed just now. She only knew that if Lin Yi didn't succeed this time, then the two of them would really be in danger. Relying on the intelligent armor and the laser cannon, Kang Ming was now an invincible humanoid monster. Unfortunately, this was not his true strength. Once it involved the field where these two equipment couldn't be used, he was immediately beaten back to his original state, such as divine sense perception. Until Lin Yi appeared behind him silently, Kang Ming still didn't realize it. Instead, Su Lingchong, who was next to him, reacted first. Without saying anything, he fled to the side and shouted in horror, "Lin Yi!" Chapter 47:20. Looking at the helmet wrapped around Kang Ming's head, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel pity. He didn't expect this guy to be so cautious. Even at this time, he still wrapped the helmet. Otherwise, he would have been killed instantly. However, it was just a little pity. Lin Yi wasn't stupid enough to place his hopes on the opponent's carelessness. According to the plan he discussed with Han Jingjing, even if the opponent didn't reveal any flaws, he could still find a way to create one. The first reaction of Kang Ming when he saw Lin Yi was to shoot him with a cannon. Unfortunately, before he could turn the muzzle of the laser cannon, Lin Yi had already made the first move. For a moment, the temperature in the narrow canyon rose sharply. A soaring flame instantly swept in all directions, followed by a series of continuous rumbling sounds. It was the Raging Flame Thousand Bursts Fist. This killing move originated from the Raging Sand Thousand Bursts Fist. Its power was strong enough to deal with a nascent soul-perfected expert. Su Lingchong, who was hiding far away, was already a little overwhelmed by the aftermath. Unfortunately, Kang Ming stood in the center of the explosion and didn't move an inch. Even the murderous aura of the 5 elements just now couldn't do anything to him. Naturally, the Raging Flame Thousand Bursts Fist had no effect on him. Ah, what kind of bullshit move is this? The momentum looks quite scary. Unfortunately, it's not enough to tickle me. The only use for it is that I don't have to buy fireworks and firecrackers during Chinese New Year. Kang Ming laughed proudly. At this moment, Lin Yi was completely a clown in his eyes. He actually dared to sneak back to attack. What's the use of that? What Kang Ming wanted to do the most now was to point the laser cannon at Lin Yi and make this pretentious leader kneel on the ground and sing "Conquer" to him. At this moment, the two of them were very close. Unfortunately, he couldn't find Lin Yi. Because of the chaos and light caused by the Raging Flame Thousand Bursts Fist, he couldn't adapt to it in a short period of time. At this moment, he was simply deaf and blind. Even if Lin Yi stood in front of him, he wouldn't be able to detect him. This was the effect Lin Yi wanted. After letting out a cold laugh, the 5 elements killing aura in his palm, which he had been accumulating for a long time, struck again. Along with the dragon's roar that was drowned out by the loud rumbling sound, the 5 elements killing aura condensed into a single point and struck the center of his opponent's helmet. As expected, although Lin Yi attacked with all his might and even thought of a way to condense his destructive power into a single point, he still couldn't break through his opponent's defense in the end. It had to be said that Kang Xiaoming's AI armor's defensive capabilities were unparalleled. It would be hard to find another piece of equipment that could compare to it in this world. However, Lin Yi did not give up just like that. He used his 5 elemental killing aura to pierce through his opponent's armor. This was similar to the Berserk Flame Thousand Bursts Fist he used to deceive others. It was only a small step in his and Han Jingjing's plan. The best part was yet to come. The 5 elements killing aura continuously bombarded the same point. If 1 was not enough, he would use 2. If 2 was not enough, he would use 3. In any case, Lin Yi had an endless supply of vital energy in his body. He was not afraid of this level of consumption at all. Furthermore, Kang Ming had a body full of awesome equipment. His reaction speed was so slow that it made people's hair stand on end. It seemed that as long as the Berserk Flame Thousand Bursts Fist continued, he would not be able to notice that his head was being split open. This continued for almost half the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. Under Lin Yi's deliberate control, the Berserk Flame Thousand Bursts Fist did not stop. As for Kang Ming, it was as if he had become a fool. He allowed Lin Yi to recklessly split open his head without noticing anything. Finally, amidst the chaos there was a faint cracking sound. The rumbling sound of the Berserk Flame Thousand Bursts Fist slowly stopped. The dazzling flame then dispersed. The narrow valley path returned to its original state. Kang Ming then found Lin Yi, who was standing in front of him. He immediately laughed crazily. "Pretentious head, is your brain flooded with water? Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you? You know that your sneak attack didn't work, yet you didn't escape. You still dare to stand here. Are you pretending to be a fool?" "I'm not a fool, but you're about to become one." Lin Yi smiled faintly. Before he finished his sentence, a blue electric arc suddenly jumped out from his fingertip. It drew a clear arc and instantly landed on the top of Kang Ming's helmet. Kang Ming was stunned. He did not expect Lin Yi to be able to generate electricity. Could it be that Han Jingjing gave him some kind of artifact? However, he was not afraid. He was about to mock Lin Yi. One must know that his AI armor was electricity resistant. In his eyes, what Lin Yi was doing was purely a clown. However, before he could grin, he heard a cracking sound coming from the top of his head. His whole body suddenly started to twitch crazily and he started to do a weird breakdance on the spot. Under the dazzling electric light, even the outline of his bones became vaguely visible. Black smoke kept coming out of his head. This was simply the rhythm of a person being electrocuted. Su Lingchong, who had escaped to the side, was immediately dumbfounded when he saw this scene. What was going on? He thought that Kang Ming would be able to defeat Lin Yi with his awesome equipment. However, looking at the situation now, why was he the one being defeated? To be honest, Lin Yi had just mastered the power of thunder and lightning. Its power was really not that strong. However, after the insulation layer of Kang Ming's AI armor was broken, it became a solid metal cage. The power of the thunder and lightning that entered it increased by several times. As long as he was still wearing this AI armor, Kang Ming could not even escape. However, even so, Kang Ming was still struggling like an undying cockroach. In the end, the power of Lin Yi's electric arc was too weak. In desperation, Lin Yi could only continue to activate the power of thunder and lightning. The flashing blue electric arcs were continuously injected into the metal armor. Kang Ming had no chance to break free. He could only be fixed there and tremble. In this way, Kang Ming was completely dominated by Lin Yi. He could no longer fight back. Even if his vitality was really like a cockroach, it was only a matter of time before he was electrocuted to death. It would just take a little more effort. However, at this moment, Hui Yudi's scream suddenly came from afar. "Be careful." Lin Yi was shocked. In fact, even without Hui Yudi's reminder, he had already received a warning from the jade pendant. However, because all his attention was on Kang Ming, he did not react for a moment. Moreover, the opponent's attack was too fast. There was no way to predict it in advance. There was no way to dodge it because it was a laser. Lin Yi's action was still a little too late. An extremely dazzling and powerful laser quietly attacked at the speed of light. There was no shocking sound, but Lin Yi's abdomen was directly penetrated, and a shocking big hole was blasted out. Before Lin Yi slowly fell, he caught a glimpse of the initiator of this laser from the corner of his eye. It was actually Su Lingqiong. Chapter 47-21. Amidst the chaos of the raging flame thousand explosive fist, the laser cannon was unknowingly thrown to the side and fell into Su Lingqiong's hands. What was even more unexpected to Lin Yi was that this guy actually knew how to use the laser cannon. This was a super high-tech weapon that represented the pinnacle of technology in the secular world. No matter how smart and simple the operation was, it was definitely not something that could be done by simply pulling the trigger. Without any scientific knowledge, an ordinary person wouldn't even be able to find the switch, let alone use it to kill people. Lin Yi initially thought that only Kang Ming would know how to use this kind of thing. After all, it was like this along the way. If not, he was afraid that a small character like Kang Ming wouldn't be able to take it. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Su Lingqiong could be said to be no threat in his eyes. Just like just now, Lin Yi didn't even need to specifically target him. Just the aftermath of the raging flame thousand explosive fist was enough to make Su Lingqiong unable to take it. Even if Su Lingqiong still had some strength left, with his little strength, he wouldn't be able to threaten Lin Yi at all. Even if he used his strongest martial arts, Lin Yi had enough confidence to single-handedly take it. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that after all the steps went smoothly, he would actually fall into this guy's trap. This guy actually knew how to use the laser cannon. Looking at Lin Yi slowly falling down with a face full of disbelief, Su Lingqiong's mouth instantly revealed a trace of a plot that had succeeded. Although the laser cannon was a very high-tech thing, he was a smart person among smart people. Previously, when he saw Kang Ming use it a few times, he had already learned it. This was just a small test. When Lin Yi fell down, only then did Kang Ming finally escape the tragic fate of being electrocuted alive. He was almost electrocuted alive. The top of his head was constantly emitting black smoke, looking like he was already dead. However, this kid's vitality was really tenacious. Until now, he actually still had one last breath left. Of course, his consciousness was already blurred. The reason why he could still stand at this moment was purely because of the support of the smart armor. Seeing that, Su Lingqiong heaved a sigh of relief. Whether Kang Ming died or not was actually not important to him, but no matter what, he was still a rare confidant. Moreover, he was going to let this kid compete for Ning Xuefei. He would be a great help in the future. Lin Yi. At this moment, Hui Yudi rushed over from the entrance and threw herself onto Lin Yi's body without a care for anything else. When she saw the ghastly bloody hole in Lin Yi's abdomen, she immediately felt the world spin around her and her mind go blank. She was a girl as cold as a snow lotus, but at this moment she had completely disregarded her image and turned into a tearful mess. Hui Yudi herself didn't know why she was like this. Ever since she was young, this was the first time she had been so worried about someone and cared so much about him, especially when the other party was a man she had not known for long. Apart from being at a loss of what to do, Hui Yudi's mind was only filled with regret, endless regret. She hated herself for hiding so far away. If she was by Lin Yi's side just now, how could she have given Su Lingqiong such an opportunity to take advantage of? How could Lin Yi have fallen into such a precarious situation today? Was a pity? This was only her wishful thinking. The raging flame thousand bursts was an indiscriminate attack within a certain range, apart from Lin Yi himself. Anyone who stood within it would definitely be heavily injured, regardless of friend or foe. If Hui Yudi had really been by Lin Yi's side just now, not to mention dealing with Su Lingchong, she herself would probably have been blasted half to death first. At that time, Lin Yi would have to divert his attention to take care of her and wouldn't have the chance to focus on dealing with Kang Ming. Lin Yi, don't die. Hui Yudi helplessly looked at the frightening bloody hole in Lin Yi's abdomen. She watched helplessly as Lin Yi fell into a deep coma, his breath becoming weaker and weaker. The last remaining signs of life were about to completely disappear, but she couldn't do anything at all. Looking at Lin Yi's deathly pale face, Hui Yudi sobbed uncontrollably. Other than hating herself for being useless, she really didn't know what to do at this time. If there was a way to save Lin Yi, she was even willing to pay any price, but how could she save him? Great recovery pill. Yes, I still have a supreme-grade great recovery pill. Hui Yudi was like a drowning person grabbing onto the last life-saving straw. She hurriedly took out the supreme-grade great recovery pill that her master had left for her to save her life, and tried everything to make Lin Yi swallow it. Although she also knew that this might not be of any use, if she couldn't quickly think of a way to deal with the bloody hole in Lin Yi's abdomen, no matter how many supreme-grade great recovery pills he ate, it would be of no use. After all, this wasn't the secular world. If Lin Yi could still maintain his consciousness, then he would have a way to do a simple treatment for himself. But Hui Yudi didn't know how to do it. How could she do such a difficult surgery? Hui Yudi was a little more courageous. If it were any other girl looking at Lin Yi's injury, they would have already fainted. While Hui Yudi's mind was blank from crying, on the other side, Su Lingchong took this opportunity to put away the Thunder Xian vine that he had almost dug out. He didn't care about digging the other one. Without saying anything, he carried the half-dead and unconscious Kang Ming, turned around and ran. Although he was still carrying the laser cannon in his hand, he didn't want to continue to entangle with Hui Yudi. After all, this little girl was an expert at the peak of the nascent soul stage, and her real strength was much stronger than his. And the most important thing was Hui Yudi's background in the East Continent. He didn't want to casually incur hatred with her. Although this matter seemed to be hidden, what if it was discovered? For Su Lingchong at this time, anyway, everything that should be done had been done, and the task had also been completed. There was really no need to continue to dawdle, lest a long night brings trouble. What's more, he suddenly killed Lin Yi with a cannon this time. When he returned, he didn't know how to explain it to the higher-ups. Although this situation was pardonable in the end, it was still a violation of the higher-ups' order. He didn't know whether the mysterious man would blame him or not. Alas, he could only take one step at a time. However, even if the mysterious man really punished him, Su Lingchong could only pinch his nose and accept it. Anyway, he took this opportunity to successfully get rid of his sworn enemy, Lin Yi. No matter how he looked at it, it was not a loss for him. And if it really didn't work, he could use Kang Ming to take the blame, and he could just stay out of it. On the other side, Su Lingchong carried Kang Ming and ran quickly to the exit. Hui Yudi, who was immersed in grief and hesitation, suddenly came to a realization. If Lin Yi was really going to die, then even if she had to risk her life, she would put Su Lingchong and Kang Ming, the two main culprits, to death and avenge Lin Yi. Chapter 47:22. It seemed that it was too late to chase after him. After all, Hui Yudi could not possibly leave Lin Yi here with his last breath. Hui Yudi didn't know what to do at this point. She could only sit beside Lin Yi and cry her heart out. She didn't know how long it had been, but the beauty's eyes were swollen from crying. If someone else were to see this scene, they would definitely be heartbroken. People who didn't know better might even think that she was the wife of a deceased husband. No. Hui Yudi suddenly shook her head and mumbled to herself, I can't keep crying like this, I have to think of a way to save Lin Yi, I have to think of a way, I can't just watch him die. Hui Yudi knew that it was useless to rely on herself. The great recover pill on her was also of no help. Since she could not think of a way, she could only ask for help from others. However, no one would enter this place. After all, there were very few people who knew about this place. There were even fewer people who could pass through the Sky Thunder array outside. Hui Yudi thought for a moment and immediately prepared to carry the dying Lin Yi. No matter what, she had to get out of here first. There might be medical experts among the other participants. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, she must not let it go. Hui Yudi was using all her strength to help Lin Yi up. Suddenly, a small object fell out of her backpack. Hui Yudi looked at it and was stunned. Wasn't this the thing that Lin Yi used to communicate with Han Jingjing? Hui Yudi's breathing suddenly became rapid. This thing that Lin Yi called a cell phone was no less than a life-saving straw in her eyes. If she could communicate with Han Jingjing now, she might be able to find a way to save Lin Yi. Hui Yuti did not have time to think too much. She quickly picked up the cell phone and fiddled with it. She had never seen a cell phone before and did not know how to use it. She had only seen Lin Yi use it once. Therefore she could only rely on memory and imitate Lin Yi's actions. He tried all kinds of methods. Fortunately there was only one number saved in the phone. Hui Yuti was sweating profusely as she fumbled around for a while. She accidentally pressed the call button, and the call was successfully made. Big brother Lin Yi? How is it? Did it work? Han Jingjing's voice came from the phone. She was anxiously waiting for Lin Yi's results on the other side. Hearing Han Jingjing's voice, Hui Yuti was surprised and happy. She couldn't wait to wipe her tears and quickly picked up the phone like Lin Yi did before. He stammered, Lin Yi? Lin Yi is in trouble. Suddenly hearing a woman's voice, Han Jingjing was immediately stunned. She couldn't help but ask in surprise, Who are you? I'm Hui Yuti. I'm a disciple of the East Continent's Qinjiao Academy. Hui Yuti hurriedly explained before sobbing and begging for help. Lin Yi's stomach has been pierced by someone, he's about to die. Quickly think of a way to save him, I'm begging you. What? Big brother Lin Yi is about to die? Han Jingjing suddenly turned pale with fright. She felt a little dizzy for a moment and almost fainted on the spot. She finally steadied herself and said, Quickly tell me in detail. How did big brother Lin Yi get injured? At this time, no one cared about who was on the other side of the phone, whether it was Hui Yuti or Han Jingjing. The only thought in their minds was to save Lin Yi. After Lin Yi finished talking to you, he went in to beat up that rich man. I don't know what martial arts he used, but after a moment of confusion, I saw a bolt of lightning strike that rich man's body. That rich man was electrocuted until he was half dead. But the other person took the rich man's divine weapon and sneak attacked Lin Yi, punching a big hole in Lin Yi's stomach. Lin Yi is about to die now. Hui Yuti said incoherently. Although the other party's words were very messy, and it was hard to understand what was going on. But Han Jingjing still understood a little, and that was the injury on Lin Yi's stomach. It was caused by the laser cannon. Listen to me, don't be anxious. Now carefully check big brother Lin Yi's pulse and breath, then tell me what's the situation. Han Jingjing was unexpectedly calm. Even after she said this, she couldn't help but feel surprised. Oh, okay. Influenced by Han Jingjing, Hui Yuti finally calmed down a little. She held her breath and checked Lin Yi's pulse and breath, then said with half surprise and half apprehension, There is, but it's very weak, I don't know how much longer he can last. Phew. That's good. Han Jingjing heard this and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. If it was any other normal person, even if it was a high-level cultivator with a strong vitality, if there was a big hole in his stomach like Lin Yi, he would have died a long time ago. But at this moment, Lin Yi still maintained a weak pulse and breath, which meant that he had entered a deep state of self-healing. This kind of thing was a fantasy in the eyes of others, but Han Jingjing had been with Lin Yi for a long time, and had long understood the magical aspects of Lin Yi. With her attitude of always carrying out scientific research, she even understood some aspects more thoroughly than Lin Yi himself, so she firmly believed that Lin Yi would definitely not die. Back then, her abdomen was also smashed by little 11, but in the end, it was still healed by Lin Yi, so she was very confident in Lin Yi. Calm down first, big brother Lin Yi will not die, think of a way to bring big brother Lin Yi back first. Han Jingjing said decisively. Really? Hui Yuti heard this and was immediately overjoyed. During this period of time she was already terrified and helpless, but after hearing Han Jingjing's words, her whole person immediately became excited. Really, big brother Lin Yi's vitality is not comparable to that of ordinary people. Even in a deep coma, he can still self-heal. According to your description, this is the situation now, so you don't have to worry too much. Big brother Lin Yi will definitely not die. As long as you can bring him back safely, he will definitely be able to recover. Han Jingjing comforted her gently. Oh, that's good. Hui Yuti finally let out a real sigh of relief and said in her heart, Thank you, if not for you, I really would have died here. Chapter 47:23. Well, I see. After saying that, Hui Yuti studied for a while and finally hung up the phone. Then she looked at Lin Yi on the ground and let out a sigh of relief. She was really anxious just now, but now after listening to Han Jingjing's judgment, her heart that was hanging in midair finally fell to the ground. Although it was inevitable that she was a little worried, she was finally not as worried as before. After adjusting her breathing, Hui Yuti immediately tried to carry Lin Yi on her back. This place would be closed in 5 days, and then the entire Sky Thunder matrix outside would be reset. Without Lin Yi leading the way, she couldn't even get out, so she had to leave as soon as possible. After exiting the 5 Thunder Retribution Archway, Hui Yuti carried Lin Yi on her back and walked out. She still couldn't wander around the Stonehenge outside. Fortunately, she remembered the route when she followed Lin Yi, so she could get out smoothly. Earlier, Su Lingchong had already carried Kong Mingming and rushed out. He was really afraid that Hui Yudi would chase after them like crazy, so he didn't stop at all along the way. Even if he saw some treasures of heaven and earth, he directly ignored them. After all, with the Thunder Shen Rattan in hand, all the other treasures of heaven and earth here were relatively unimportant. The only thing Su Lingchong wanted to do now was to return to West Island as soon as possible, in case of unexpected troubles. After running for his life day and night, Su Lingchong's travel-worn figure appeared at the entrance of the 10,000-year Grand Canyon 5 days later, and behind him was Kong Mingming, who was half dead, like a dead dog. Anyway, his whole body was protected by the intelligent armor, so it was not a big problem for him to do anything. Compared with carrying him on his shoulder, it was obviously easier to drag him. Su Lingchong didn't feel sorry for this kind of underling. It was already very kind of him to drag him all the way back. Out of the 10,000-year Grand Canyon was the oasis before. Without any hesitation, Su Lingchong dragged Kong Mingming and walked out. At this moment, a group of people suddenly blocked the way. It was the scar-faced man and his gang. The reason Scarface and his gang were blocking this place was naturally to plunder the loot from the trial takers that were leaving this place. They were obviously not good people. Although they had claimed that they would only take half, this was basically empty talk. Of all the trial takers that had fallen into their hands, it would already be a blessing to their ancestors if they could keep a 10th or 20% of them. If it wasn't for the fact that they were driven to desperation, Scarface and the others didn't even intend to leave 10% of the loot to these cultivators. However, they were all high-level cultivators above the gold core stage, and most of them were nascent soul stage experts. If they really wanted to fight with their lives on the line, they wouldn't be easy to deal with. So, Scarface could only give them some hope so that they wouldn't have to fight to the death. Scarface and the others were instantly shocked when they saw Su Lingchong's figure from afar, and all of them hurriedly retreated by themselves. They didn't have the slightest ferocious appearance from before, and instead, all of them smiled obsequiously as they were deeply afraid of incurring the slightest displeasure. It couldn't be helped. The scene of Kong Xiaoming killing their second head in one shot was still fresh in their minds. It wasn't just Kong Xiaoming. Even Su Lingchong's appearance was firmly engraved in their minds. This kind of ferocious demon was truly not to be provoked. In their line of work, to put it bluntly, they bullied the weak and feared the strong. It wasn't a big problem to be a little greedy and a little stupid, but there was a rule of survival that had to be firmly remembered. If you met someone you couldn't afford to provoke, you must hide as far away as possible. Otherwise you wouldn't even know how you died. Boss, this seems a little strange. Why is that armored man being dragged on the ground? Is he dead or unconscious? The underling couldn't help but ask. That's right. Could it be that they encountered some powerful monster? Scarface was also puzzled. Boss, then should we? The underling made a throat-cutting gesture. Don't be anxious. Let's wait and see first. Scarface pinched his chin and cautiously shook his head. Although the person he feared the most, Kong Mingming, seemed to be on the verge of death, he couldn't figure out the details of the remaining person. However, he couldn't figure out the background of the remaining person. Although he looked like an ordinary nascent soul stage expert, what if he wasn't easy to deal with? As the saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. Anyway, there were many other fat sheep that could be slaughtered. Scarface didn't particularly care about the little bit of profit on the other party. So before he figured out the details, he didn't want to take risks. Since Scarface had spoken so, the other underlings naturally didn't dare to act rashly. They all retreated to the side with fear. While talking, Su Lingchong had already dragged Kong Mingming to a distance of 20 feet. Scarface's eyes suddenly lit up. He found a small piece of strangely shaped vine on the back of the other party's bag. There were electric arcs flashing from time to time. Thunder Shen vine. Scarface was obviously a master who knew his stuff. Although he was already a profound Ascension Stage master and theoretically didn't need the Thunder Shen pill to deal with the Thunder Tribulation, this didn't hinder his love for good things. Especially the Thunder Shen vine, which was a rare treasure in the world. After being shocked, Scarface carefully looked at it again. Because the other party only revealed a small tip of the iceberg, he couldn't see whether it was mature or not. But at least one thing was certain, this thing was definitely the Thunder Shen vine. Scarface swallowed greedily. He really didn't want to let go of such a treasure. After all, the value of the Thunder Shen vine alone was enough to cover all the other profits. But he didn't want to take risks because of this. What if the remaining kid was also not someone to be trifled with? Boss, that kid has really fainted. Let's do it. At this time, A subordinate with a full head of braids jumped out. "Well, you guys go." Scarface nodded immediately, but he stepped back quietly. In this way, even if something went wrong, he could stay out of it. After obtaining Scarface's approval, the braided man immediately took the lead and rushed forward excitedly. He blocked Su Lingchong's path in a carefree manner and said, "Hand over all the heavenly treasures on you, and I can make the decision to let you live. Otherwise, get lost." Su Lingchong just wanted to return to West Island. He was not in the mood to waste time with this kind of subordinate. He immediately scolded with a cold face, "Have you forgotten what happened last time? You have no memory, you dog. Oh, you're so arrogant." Seeing this, the man with braids laughed instead of being angry. He pointed at Kang Ming Ming on the ground like a dead dog and said, "Don't play dumb with me. This armored man is half dead and can't even protect himself. You want to scare people with him? Do you really think that I don't have a brain?" Chapter 47-24. Humph, as expected of a brainless dog. Su Lingchong snorted coldly. Seeing that the other party was reaching out to grab his backpack, he immediately set up the laser cannon and fired without saying a word. The braided man was still sneering just a moment ago, but a laser flashed and the next moment, his entire head evaporated into thin air. The scene was so strange and bloody that even Scarface, who was a mountain king who killed and set fires as if it was his daily routine, was dumbfounded. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and couldn't say a word for a long time. Even though Scarface was already fearful before, he definitely didn't think that this kid would be so terrifying. It seemed that he was not any weaker than the armored man. How could he know that this had nothing to do with strength? Even if it was just an ordinary child, as long as he knew how to operate the laser cannon, he could kill people like grass. Who else? Su Lingchong aimed the laser cannon at the crowd with an unfriendly expression. Immediately, the group of people were scared and ran away like rats. The scene was really chaotic. Seeing that Su Lingchong seemed to be staring at him, Scarface immediately broke out in a cold sweat. In a moment of desperation, he quickly jumped out and shouted, "You bunch of blind idiots, you even dare to provoke such a great expert, you deserve to die. Didn't I already tell you to treat these two masters well? Are your brains filled with shit? You can't even remember such an important thing." Finished speaking, Scarface turned his head with a flattering smile and cautiously said to Su Lingchong, "Young hero, you're a great person and don't hold grudges against these lowly people. It's all my fault for not disciplining them strictly, allowing these disappointing idiots to cause trouble for you. How about I find a place for you to rest your feet? I have top-notch spirit tea, treat it as an apology." Scarface's change of expression stunned Su Lingchong. Since the other party took the initiative to admit defeat, he naturally wouldn't kill them. After all, the other party was a true early-stage profound ascension expert. Even if he had a powerful weapon like the laser cannon, he didn't have an intelligent armor to protect his body. Facing such a strong enemy, his heart still trembled. Otherwise, Su Lingchong wouldn't have been scared away by Hui Yudi, who was a nascent soul-perfected expert. Now that he was able to scare Scarface, it was already the best result for him. "No need, I'm still in a hurry." Su Lingchong immediately refused. He was afraid that the other party would notice something, so he didn't dare to stay in such a place for long. After saying that, he directly dragged Kang Ming Ming forward. Sure. Please." Scarface hurriedly stepped aside. Even his subordinates consciously opened up a path for them. They respectfully watched as Su Lingchong and Scarface left. Su Lingchong dragged Kang Ming Ming towards the teleportation formation without stopping. On the other hand, Hui Yudi was on the other side. He was also carrying the dying Lin Yi on his back, but he was very careful along the way. He had to be cautious with every step he took. He could only try his best to choose the path he took when he came, so as to reduce the risk as much as possible. However, in this way her speed would be much slower. After all, she was not like Su Lingchong, who had a super-killing weapon like the laser cannon. If she encountered anything on the way, she could just blast it and be done with it. Along the way, if there was even the slightest sign of trouble, they would be alerted. Hui Yudi was trembling with fear as if she was treading on thin ice. She couldn't be blamed for being timid. The key was that Lin Yi's current state was too dangerous. He really couldn't stand any more tossing and turning. It only took Su Lingchong 5 days to drag Kang Ming Ming to the exit of the canyon, but it took Hui Yudi 15 days. Whether it was the trial takers or the spirit beasts, they were all targets that she had to try her best to avoid. So she took a lot of detours on the way, and from time to time she had to hide for a long time. Her speed was really not fast. 10 days had passed before this, and now it took another 15 days to return. So when Hui Yudi carried Lin Yi out of the 10,000 Years Grand Canyon, it was already not far from the deadline of 1 month. At this time, most of the trial takers should have returned to West Island. The rest were either masters in the peak of the nascent soul realm who could stay for a few more days, or they had missed the deadline. Like Scarface's group, they were trapped here and couldn't get out. There was no third kind of people. Hui Yudi carried Lin Yi on her back and appeared at the exit of the canyon. In front of them was the oasis. At this time, Scarface's group still hadn't dispersed. Instead, his group of people had grown stronger. It turned out that at this moment, not only Scarface's original group of people, but also some trial takers who couldn't get out this time, were forced to choose to be under his command and become one of his men. In the crowd, Scarface said to one of his subordinates in the peak of the nascent soul realm, "Han Qin, you are now at the last bottleneck of the peak of the nascent soul realm. If you continue to stay here, you will follow in my footsteps and be completely trapped in this damn place. So you should take this opportunity to leave quickly. You have followed me for so long and done a lot of things for me. Even if you don't have any credit, you have worked hard. Take the things with you as a farewell gift from me." "Thank you, boss." The master in the peak of the nascent soul realm, called Han Qin, was grateful on the spot. "Well, all of you listen to me. As long as you follow my brothers, I will never let you suffer. Han Qin is your example." Scarface took the opportunity to win over everyone. Sure enough, everyone's mood suddenly rose, especially the new subordinates. They were originally dejected and disheartened, but after seeing this scene they all cheered up. It had to be said that this Scarface was really good at winning people's hearts. With Han Qin as an example in front of them, everyone would only be more loyal to him. After all, as long as they followed him with peace of mind, even if they couldn't get out for the time being, when they reached the bottleneck of the peak of the nascent soul realm, they could go out like Han Qin. Only when there was hope would there be motivation. For everyone, there was no doubt that this was the best ending. So everyone was willing to follow him, and Scarface's method could be said to be tried and tested. Every trial could be replenished with a batch of fresh blood, so that his team continued to grow, becoming a real local bully here. Hui Yudi looked at this scene from afar. She saw through Scarface's intentions at a glance. The reason why he wanted to send away his little brother who had reached the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm was not only to win over people's hearts, but the most important reason was that Scarface didn't want to see a second profound ascending stage master. In this place he was the only profound ascending stage master. With his strength, he was naturally worthy of being the local tyrant. But if there was a second profound ascending stage master, then his position would not be stable. As the saying goes, one mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. It might be a situation of life and death. Sending people away could not only eliminate the threat, but also gain a good reputation. It had to be said that this Scarface was a rare smart person. Chapter 47:25. However, none of this had anything to do with her. Hui Yudi gritted her teeth and took advantage of the fact that everyone was cheering and their attention was not on this side. She carried Lin Yi on her back and carefully rushed over. She did not have the strength and confidence to face the scarred man. Once she was stopped by these people, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hui Yudi's movement technique was fast and light, and the strength of the peak of the Yuanying stage was not as good as the scarred man. At this moment, the scarred man was busy winning over the hearts of the people and had no time to care about this side. This was the perfect opportunity. Quietly, seeing that she was about to pass, Hui Yudi couldn't help but start to feel a little lucky. Suddenly, a majestic figure appeared in front of her. He was also a peak of the Yuanying stage master. In terms of momentum, he was even stronger than Hui Yudi. It was Han Qin who was set as a role model by the scarred man in public. Hui Yudi's face suddenly changed. Because of this Han Qin, the eyes of the others quickly turned over. One by one, they looked at Hui Yudi and Lin Yi on her back with a surprised expression. Hui Yudi's heart was beating wildly. This time it's over. Han Qin looked up and down at Hui Yudi's graceful figure and salivated. Especially when he found that Lin Yi's abdomen was pierced with a fatal blood hole, his mind suddenly became active. If Lin Yi, this ruthless person, was alive, then even if he had 10,000 guts, he would never dare to touch a single hair of Hui Yudi. But now it was different. This ruthless person was dead. Even if he was not dead, he was not far from death. What was there to be afraid of? Hee, little girl looks pretty good. Do you want to play with Big Brother? Han Qin had a lascivious smile on his face as he reached out to touch Hui Yudi's face. After being trapped in this place for so many years, he was already burning with lust. Now that he could have some fun before leaving, this was simply a gift from the heavens. However, before he could reach out his hand, a strong airflow suddenly surged beside him and the scarred man's figure appeared beside him. Without saying a word, he slapped him away. He was dizzy and couldn't get up for a long time. Woyuti was shocked. She was just about to make a move. If the opponent was just a full-circle original infant cultivator with her strength, she would not lose. No matter what, she was a genius disciple of the East Continent's Morning Pride Academy, and her methods were far stronger than those of the same level. But now it was suddenly changed to Scarface, a peak early-stage profound ascending expert. Woyuti's heart instantly sank to the bottom. How could she beat him? Unexpectedly, the scarred man didn't do anything to her. Instead, he smiled apologetically. No matter how one looked at it, his expression was so flattering that Woyuti was stunned. Boss, why did you? Han Chin felt dizzy from the slap. He looked at Scarface, feeling wronged and speechless. If you want to steal a woman, just say it. You're the boss. Do you think I dare to not let you have her? Do you have to hit me directly? Scarface rushed over and grabbed him by the collar. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "You dare to touch this woman? If you want to court death, wait until you get out. I won't stop you, but don't drag me down with you. Isn't that ruthless man already dead? What's there to be afraid of?" Han Chin curled his lips disapprovingly. Are you fucking stupid? Have you forgotten the lesson of the armored man? How many days has it been? Scarface spat and said resentfully, didn't the armored man also fall down? But the person beside him is also a ruthless man that none of us can afford to offend. You see, this one is lying on the ground, but how do you know what kind of person she is? What if birds of a feather flock together and she's also a ruthless man who hides his strength? This? Hearing Scarface's analysis, Han Chin broke out in a cold sweat. Thinking about it carefully, it did seem to make sense. He was almost blinded by lust and made a big mistake. People who are about to go out, don't fail at the last moment. If you cause trouble at this time, I won't let you go. Scarface said sternly. Yes, boss, don't worry. I will definitely not cause trouble for you. Definitely not. Han Chin nodded repeatedly and promised. Under Woyuti's strange gaze, Scarface continued to lecture his little brother. After Scarface finished lecturing his little brother, he smiled apologetically and forced out a smile that he thought was friendly. Miss, are you preparing to go back? Woyuti nodded. Just now, although they spoke softly, she still heard it. So at this moment, her heart was at ease. She secretly laughed and was no longer nervous. Oh, do you want me to have someone send you? Scarface took the initiative to be attentive. No need. Woyuti said with a cold face, then ignored everyone and quickly left with Lin Yi on her back. After the oasis, the rest of the journey was a monotonous desert. Previously, she felt that it was extremely boring, but for Woyuti at this time, it couldn't be better. Because no matter how boring it was much better than being surrounded by danger. Not to mention that there was not much time left, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. Time passed quickly. 3 days later, Woyuti finally arrived at the teleportation formation. At this time, there were already several trial takers waiting in line. Those who rushed to go out at this time were naturally masters at the peak of Yuanying realm. When everyone saw Woyuti and the dying Lin Yi on her back, they didn't have much reaction except for being surprised. After all, there were 2 masters from West Island here to maintain order. If you wanted to make trouble in this place, you had to pay the price. What's more, Woyuti herself was also a master at the peak of Yuanying realm. If they really fought to the death, they might not be able to gain any advantage. Even if they could, they would inevitably be seriously injured because of this, and they couldn't recover in a short time. Then they wouldn't even be able to go out. Woyuti carried Lin Yi on her back and quietly waited in line behind the crowd. After the people in front of her left one by one, Woyuti was about to step into the teleportation formation, but she was stopped by a master from West Island. Only one person can go in. If you take him, you can't go by yourself. The master from West Island explained faintly. What? Woyuti was shocked when she heard that. Before the trial of West Island began, she vaguely heard Yen Xinlan mention this, but she didn't take it to heart at that time. She didn't expect that it would become a fatal obstacle now. This is decided by the teleportation formation. No one can change it. Even if you carry a dead person on your back, it doesn't matter. Only one person can go through at a time. Of course, there are no restrictions on the treasures of heaven and earth. The master from West Island looked at Woyuti with some sympathy. Chapter 47-26. This woman worked so hard to carry the man who was obviously going to die back. She was really affectionate and loyal. If there was a way, they wouldn't mind making an exception for her. Unfortunately, this was not up to them. The teleportation formation was designed in this way. Even if the god of heaven came, it would be useless. This? Huiyuti suddenly frowned. It was not easy to get back to this place. She thought that she could take Lin Yi back to West Island and save herself from danger, but she didn't expect to be stuck at this last step. What should she do? In any case, she couldn't go back alone. Leaving Lin Yi here alone was tantamount to asking him to die. But they couldn't leave together, so she was in a dilemma. Hey, are you going to leave or not? We are still waiting in line. While Huiyuti was hesitating and in a dilemma, the people at the back of the line began to get impatient. They didn't care so much. They were in a hurry to go back. If it took too long and they couldn't go back, who could they blame? Then, let me think about it. Huiyuti had to step aside for a while and let the people at the back pass first. She found a clean place not far from the teleportation formation and settled Lin Yi down. Then she stayed by his side and frowned. Time passed little by little. Seeing that the trial testers who came back one after another were all teleported away, Huiyuti was still at her wits' end and couldn't come up with a feasible plan. Because of the presence of the masters from West Island, she was saved from the trouble of being harassed by other trial testers. Even Han Qin, who coveted her beauty, didn't dare to look at her when he passed by. But this didn't solve the problem. No matter how carefree she was, what was the use of being trapped here and unable to get out? 2 days later, it was a whole month. At this time, all the trial testers had left. Even those who stayed here knew that they couldn't leave, so they turned to the scarred man. At this moment, only Huiyuti and Lin Yi were left beside the teleportation formation. This is the deadline. Are you going to leave or not? If you don't leave, you really can't get out. This man is obviously going to die. There's no need for you to stay here and die with him. It seemed that the two masters of West Island were also ready to leave. After looking at each other as women, they couldn't bear to see her leave, so they came over and advised her softly. No, I won't leave him behind. I definitely won't. Huiyuti shook her head firmly. There are plenty of fish in the sea and there are plenty of good men in the world. Why do you have to hang yourself on a tree? One of the West Island masters sighed helplessly. West Island was a feminist society, and it was not as particular as other places. It was simply unreasonable for a woman to commit suicide for a man who was obviously going to die. A woman would commit suicide for a man. That's right, little sister, you're a peak nascent soul cultivator, right? Even if you go all out, the power you can muster will only be enough to activate the array formation now. It will be useless if you delay it for another day. You can only wait until the next trial begins. But you should be very clear about the situation in this place. As a girl, it's simply wishful thinking if you want to wait for the next trial test in peace. Those people will definitely target you. Another master from the West Island tried to persuade her. The existence of people like the scarred man was never a secret, but the top management of West Island never intended to deal with him. Instead, they were quite indulgent. To put it bluntly, since this was the trial place, people like the scarred man were like other monsters and beasts. They were all stepping stones for the trial takers, so they were allowed to do whatever they wanted. Huiyuti still shook her head. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and said, "Two sisters. If I make a move with all my strength and try to teleport him out first, I wonder if it will work?" This was the only way she could come up with after thinking about it for the past 2 days. Although she also knew that it might not be so easy in case it was really feasible. Anyway, there was no one else waiting in line now. She believed that the two masters of West Island should be able to give her a clear answer. In that case, you can't get out by yourself. Now it's been a month. If you want to start the transmission formation, you have to use your strongest move. You can't hold back at all. Only in this way can you barely succeed. In fact, even so, you may not be able to get out. This is not a joke. The master of West Island warned him in a stern voice. Yes, 1 month is the limit of a master in the peak of Yuanying realm. You can't have any more losses. Another master of West Island also shook his head and added, besides, if you want to put him into the transmission formation and stand outside to start the transmission, although it's not completely impossible, it's very difficult because the eye of the transmission formation is hidden inside. If there is no special move, you can't reach it from the outside at all. You have to think about it clearly. This. Huiyuti gritted her teeth and thought for a while. No matter whether it would work or not, she should try her best to see if she could send Lin Yi out first. But in this way, no matter whether Lin Yi could be successfully transmitted out in the end or not, she would definitely not be able to get out. This was equivalent to using her own fate as a bet to fight for a chance for Lin Yi. As for the difficulty that the two masters of West Island said, Huiyuti didn't take it too seriously. After all, she was a genius disciple of East Continent's Morning Pride Academy. She still had this kind of means. "You'd better come with us. This kind of attempt is completely meaningless. No matter what, one of you has to stay. If you choose him, not to mention the fact that you may not succeed, even if you really succeed with his dying state, I guess he can't bear the burden of the transmission and maybe he'll die even faster. Seeing that the time was almost up, the two masters of West Island finally persuaded her. Hoyuti was suddenly shocked when she heard this. If they hadn't reminded her, she would have forgotten this point. The transmission process was a huge burden on the body. For cultivators, it naturally didn't matter in normal times, but in the current state of Lin Yi, what they said was really not an alarmist. Moreover, even if Lin Yi could get through it now, if there was no one to care about him when he arrived at West Island, even if there was only a little gap in the middle, there might be unexpected trouble. What if Kaizi and his helpers were waiting at the door of the transmission formation on the opposite side, waiting for a chance to kill him? In this way it was too risky to send Lin Yi out alone, and obviously it was not a wise choice. But if Hoyuti was asked to go alone, she would never agree. Chapter 47:27. There was no reason. This was almost her instinctive thought. In any case she must guard Lin Yi. As for the serious consequences of staying here, Hoyuti didn't think much about it at all. Anyway, it was useless to think too much at this time. You're not leaving? Then you really can't leave. The two masters suddenly looked at each other and couldn't help but be shocked. If you stay here, I don't know how long you'll have to wait. It's unknown when the next trial will start. You should know that our West Island trial doesn't open regularly. If you're lucky, it may only open once a year. If you're unlucky, it may open for decades or even hundreds of years. It depends on the week period of the formation. I understand. I understand what you two sisters said, but I can't leave him here alone. I appreciate your kindness, but you don't need to persuade me anymore. Hoyuti said firmly. The two masters looked at each other and their faces were moved. Although they felt sorry for Hoyuti, such an affectionate and righteous woman deserved everyone's respect. Since the other party had made up her mind, it was futile for them to persuade her. After all, they didn't know each other. It was already very good that they could do this. Well, but you have to be careful when you stay here. Find a hidden place nearby to hide. If there's nothing else, it's best not to go inside again. I believe you know what those guys are like, not to mention they have profound ascending stage masters. You can't beat them. The two masters sighed. They couldn't continue to waste time here, so they could only give this last kind reminder. Thank you, two sisters. Hoyuti nodded. After watching the two masters leave, she quietly stayed by Lin Yi's side, looking at him blankly. No one knew what she was thinking in her mind. At the same time, on the other side, in the side courtyard of the West Island's palace, all the challengers who came out one after another had gathered in the open space next to it. It was bustling and crowded. Although the trial of West Island itself didn't stipulate the so-called trial time, today was the deadline of 1 month. In terms of objective conditions, this was already the actual deadline of the trial. If they didn't come out after today, it meant that they couldn't come out at all. At this moment, in order to congratulate the successful return of the trial takers, in order to show their solemnity. This time, it wasn't West Island's deputy island master Yen Xinlan who presided over the overall situation, but West Island's island master herself, Ning Shangling. Compared to the previous birthday banquet, Ning Shangling was clearly much closer to the crowd this time. With a friendly smile on her face, she leisurely walked among the crowd and waved to everyone from time to time. Wherever Ning Shangling passed, the crowd would burst into an uproar. To be able to come into contact with this beautiful island lord, who had always been high and mighty at such a close distance. All the trial takers felt genuinely flattered. Of course, even if they had some dirty thoughts in their hearts, they would never dare to show it in this place. Ning Shangling was like an empress in West Island. If anyone dared to blaspheme it, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't walk out of West Island alive. Behind the beautiful Ning Shangling was Ning Xuefei, who was as pure as a fairy. According to the rules, the princess of West Island could not easily show her face in public, but the trial of West Island this time was a little special, and it was related to her marriage. Her future husband was very likely to be among this group of trial takers, so it was reasonable for her to follow her mother to appease the crowd. As Ning Xuefei's best friends, Shanghai Laner and Han Jingjing naturally stayed by her side. At this time, the three women were not in the mood to watch the fun, and they frequently looked at the exit of the transmission formation. Han Jingjing had already told Ning Xuefei and Shanghai Laner that Lin Yi was seriously injured and in a coma. Although they knew that someone was taking care of him, they still couldn't help but worry and be nervous. If Ning Shangling hadn't forbidden them, the three of them would have run to the transmission formation to wait for him. If they could, they even wished they could be transmitted in. Time went by bit by bit. Seeing that the trial takers hadn't come out for a long time, the three women couldn't help but become more and more anxious. Was there any problem? After all, the three of them had investigated the matter of the teleportation circle. While it wasn't entirely impossible to teleport an unconscious Lin Yi over, it was still an extremely difficult task. At this point in time, one could only imagine the price the enemy had to pay. There were two choices, either to keep herself or to keep Lin Yi. If it were the three of them, they would definitely sacrifice themselves to transmit Lin Yi out without hesitation. But the other party was just a strange woman whom they had just met. Would she do that? No one knew the answer, so they could only wait. However, under the expectation of the three women, Lin Yi's figure didn't appear for a long time. Until the two guards of West Island came back, Lin Yi still didn't come out. Han Jingjing and Shanghai Laner looked at each other, and their faces suddenly became a little pale. Ning Xuefei almost fainted on the spot at this moment. This wasn't just related to Lin Yi's safety, it was also related to her marriage. She had practically pinned all her hopes on Lin Yi, and the blow she suffered at this moment was so heavy that she couldn't bear it. There's no one inside? At this moment, a woman suddenly rushed up and hurriedly asked the two guards of West Island who had just walked out of the transmission formation. This person was the East Continent's Morning Pride Academy's vice headmaster, Lu Ziyu. As the leader of the East Continent Academy this time, Lu Ziyu's every action represented the East Continent Academy. So, she had always spoken appropriately and had never lost her composure as she did now. At this moment, her expression was extremely ugly, even more so than Ning Xuefei and the other two women. Because not only had Lin Yi not come out, her precious disciple, Huiyudi, had also not come out. To her, Huiyudi was not only the most important personal disciple, but in a sense she was also like a mother and daughter. She had painstakingly brought her up from infancy, and this kind of relationship was far from that of an ordinary master-disciple relationship. The two guards of West Island were instantly shocked, and took a closer look at Lu Ziyu. Knowing that she was a good friend of Island Master Ning Shangling, they didn't dare to slight her and immediately replied respectfully, "There's a woman beside the transmission formation, and a man whose status is unknown. However, like the rest of the people, they probably won't be able to come out."